evening, everyone. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome to the Byram Hills Board of Education meeting of Tuesday, May 6, 2008. This meeting is both a business meeting of the board as well as what we denominate as Budget Hearing 5, which I'm sure you're all going to stay for. This is one of the special evenings we have, and especially as the year starts to wind down and the weather finally turns warm, end-of-the-year rituals start to take place here at Byram Hills, and one of the more significant of these end-of-the-year events is the recognition of the Byram Hills science research students. This is a program which really, in many ways, put Byram Hills on the map. And Dr. Robert Pavlica, who was the founder and longtime mentor of the program, we recently said goodbye to, just seems like yesterday. This really was so near and dear to him that to me, every time we have one of these presentations, it's just another way that we honor Dr. Pavlica and the service which he gave to Byram Hills. The Byram Hills Science Research Program is so significant in so many ways for the education and for the chance it gives the students to really work outside the classroom. And we want to make sure the community doesn't think that we on the board nor the community should take the success of this program for granted. And whether we have no semifinalists, 1, 5, or 10, or no finalists, 1 or 5, whatever, the individual effort that each of these students puts into the program really is what makes it worthwhile. It's not so much what we get out of it, it's what you get out of it. And we think, based on the results and based on the reports, and you get out of it a lot. And we couldn't be more thrilled about the success of this program. And Superintendent, would you like to say anything further about it?
Just to note that when we invoke Dr. Pavlica's name, I have to comment that he always said, although he was very proud of the fact that Byram Hills students over the years had accomplished so much in the way of recognition as finalists and semifinalists in the national program. 64, I think, semifinalists and 17 finalists over the years. Dr. Pavlica always said he was even more proud of the students who complete the program, even though they may not get that level of recognition. And the 17 seniors we're honoring tonight have all accomplished that prodigious amount of work. We're very proud of you. We'll tell you that on many occasions.
We really are. I know that some of these seniors are busy studying for an AP Calculus exam that's coming up. At least they better be. So what I would like, if I could ask all the science research students to please line up against this wall, and we'll ask you to introduce yourselves, and then we'll ask you to say something very brief about your topic. If you could do it alphabetically, I'd appreciate it, but don't worry about that. I don't know if that's a research project. That's a research. Nandita?
Yeah.
I know that's you.
So I'm Nandita Bhattija. The title of my study was Non-Conscious Goal Pursuit Through Environmental Timing, and it just focused on whether the lyrics and background music could be presented to participants to make them subconsciously have the goal of achievement.
I'm Joey Blum. The title of my project was Using Force Sensors to Effectively Control a Below-Level Intelligent Prosthetic Device. And my research focused on developing a non-invasive and inexpensive method, a new method for controlling a prosthetic hand for an amputee.
Hi, I'm Christy Gardner. The title of my research was Nutrient Limitation and Allotoxicity in the red tag gynecoplagia Alexandrian pondians. And basically what I did was study the environmental factors that influence the growth of this red tide algal species.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Richer, and I created and manipulated a facial computer animation using a Nintendo Wiimote.
Hi, my name is Viva Solanki, and the name of my study was a retrospective qualitative study of the impact of pregnancy on women with eating disorders.
Hi, my name is Courtney Formicola. My title was Recall Responses of the HER2 oncoprotein in patients with breast and ovarian cancers. and I basically developed evidence for a future cancer vaccine that's currently in clinical trials.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Kaufman, and what I did with my research was try to quantify globalization by looking at the genetic deviation between native East Asian populations and East Asian immigrant populations in America and Australia.
Hi, my name is Jamie Grishel, and the title of my study was The Effective Dashboard Configuration on Novice Distracted Drivers. And what I did was I looked at how dashboard configuration affects the time off the road of inexperienced drivers.
Hi, I'm Christopher Cruz, and the title of my study was Soft Tissue Search in Ammonoid Cephalopods in the Bear Gulch Lagerstätte in Montana, USA. And a cephalopod is just a crustaceous shell creature abundant in the mid-Devonian time period. And I spent my time extracting soft tissue from these fossils.
Hi, my name is Emily Cohen, and the title of my research is Brain Compensation After Mild Traumatic Brain Injury. I looked at the regional glucose metabolic rate among healthy control brains and brains with mild traumatic brain injury to note whether there's a correlation between location of injury and glucose rate.
Anyone from the audience have any questions of these? I just want to read the certificate. It's going to be our pleasure to hand to each of you, and I'm going to call your name. Just please step in the middle here, take certificate, turn, wave for posterity. The Board of Education, Environmental Central School District Certificate of Excellence to the student. On behalf of all the residents of the school district, the Board of Education presents a Certificate of Excellence in recognition of your outstanding efforts in scientific research, particularly in your senior year. The example and commitment you have demonstrated as a scientist and researcher will benefit other students, staff, and the entire community. It is dated today and signed both by myself as President of the Board of Education and by John A. Chambers, Superintendent of Schools, and collectively we congratulate you. So when I call your name, if you'd be good enough to come up here and get another round of applause from the board. The first name I'm going to call, because she was smart enough to get in the front of the line with the name beginning with B, Nandita Bathija, who also attained the rank of national semifinalist. Next is my neighbor and good friend, Jeremy Blum, who attained the rank of national semifinalist and national finalist. Next in line is Kristen Gardner, who is the daughter of our dear board colleague Wendy Gardner. Christy attained the rank of national semifinalist. Next on my list is senior Lindsay Richer. Where's my friend Viva? Viva Solanki. Courtney Formicola, congratulations. John Kaufman, congratulations to you. And my good friend Jamie Grishel, congratulations. Christopher Cruz, congratulations. And last but certainly not least, Emily Cohen. I just want to read into the record the names of other participants who weren't able to be here because they, as we said, are busy studying for that AP Calculus exam. Allison Goldhagen, Sarah Goodison, Rachel Rabinowitz, and Rebecca Varnhagen. We congratulate them as well. It is my further pleasure to honor the faculty that participate with these students as supervisors of the science research program and other ways assist the program. And I'm happy to report that all 5 are here. And I would just like to read into the record, again, the nature of the certificate. The Board of Education, Byram Hill Central School District, Certificate of Appreciation 2. On behalf of all the residents of the school district, the Board of Education presents this token of appreciation for the time and expertise you have given to assist and inspire the students of our Byram Hill schools. The outstanding example of commitment you have demonstrated as a teacher will benefit students, other staff, and the entire community. It is dated today and signed again by myself and the superintendent of schools. Stephanie Greenwald. Thank you very much. Stephen Borneman. David Keith. Good friend Ken Kaplan. And somebody named Tim Kaltenecker. I'm not so sure either, but congratulations.
Mr. Schulman has done an excellent job of presenting the certificates. Again, we especially honor what our students have done. The work that you have accomplished is truly prodigious. I would be remiss if I didn't invite everyone to yet another opportunity to celebrate your work. David, June 7th? June 4th? 7 p.m.? The Science Research Symposium. With that invitation, we're also going to invite you to go home and prepare for that AP exam. Thank you very much for being here. We'll take a momentary TV break to let you get out.
Congratulations again. Welcome back. We have just concluded our honoring of the Byram Hills Science Research students, and because I'm the board president, I left 3 names out. So I just want to read them into the record as additional participants in the program who were unable to make it tonight: Michael Bernstein, Heather Black, and Fiona Chan, and we congratulate them as well. Okay, this is now budget hearing 5, which is the final budget hearing of our for the 2008-2009 school year. It's the final budget hearing of the 2007-2008 cycle, and I'll pass the baton to the superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. President. Budget Hearing 5 is the latest in a long series, the last in a long series. The board began public meetings on this subject in January, and faculty and administration began working on it months before that. We're now only a few weeks away from the budget vote, May 20th. We trust that people know that the budget vote is to be conducted at the H.C. Crittenden Middle School. Starting 6:30 a.m., the polls are open continuously till 9 p.m. And the only requirement to be a voter is 30 days residence in the district and proof that you're at least 18 years of age. We encourage everyone to vote. In our whole series of budget hearings, we went into some depth. Nice to see more people here tonight than we had in some of those earlier meetings. But we have tried to convey the depth of that work on the budget in several public media. We have, for instance, a budget brochure, which is in the mail as we speak. We also have a budget special on Bobcat TV that can be accessed at any time because of video streaming. Just go to BobcatTV.org. But we also have tonight a brief overview of really the bottom line of the budget. Please forgive us for not going into detail, but we do feel responsible both for TV and those who may be new to the subject tonight to at least give you the bottom line picture. Dick LaSalle has ably developed the slideshow that does that. Dick, with some help from Jackie Taylor and me, will go quickly through this overview simply to give you a summary of the budget. And the real purpose of the board's budget hearing tonight is to invite comment and questions. Because the board had to adopt the budget according to New York State law by April 15th, they don't have an opportunity to change it tonight. But we can certainly talk about it and certainly answer questions which will help people understand what they're voting on May 20th. So Dick, with thanks for developing this, we'll go right past that slide that shows all the dates in our process. We'll skip the slides on the budget guidelines, and we'll go right to the district growth pattern, which has been a key factor in Byram Hill's budgets over the last 2 decades. You see in this slide, and you'll see it also in our budget brochure, a bar graph that charts growth as it has occurred in recent years and as it is projected. We project a 1.2% growth in enrollment next year. So it's still a factor in our costs. Not quite as much of a factor as it has been over the last 2 decades when the district experienced literally an 80% enrollment growth. One of the highest rates of enrollment growth anywhere in Westchester County. You know that that led to a need to hire more faculty and build more classrooms. Those costs are in this budget as well. But I'm happy to say that this year there are no new costs for facility construction. Those have already been placed in the budget. So that growth pattern of enrollment is a key to the budget every year. We'll go to the next one, Dick. There are other factors that contribute to the budget increase beyond enrollment growth. Of course, staffing costs. Although our staffing growth was very small this year, we do have contractual obligations, salaries and benefits, and we did have considerations in enrollment and program. We did, for instance, add in this budget 2 more special education classes at the Coleman Hill School. And we went through in detail other program additions. State mandates are a factor. The state retirement systems set contribution rates for school districts, which we simply have to follow through on. And we have seen many more mandates in recent years for required state testing and the reporting of that testing, which has taken incredible amounts of teacher and staff time and really more expense than we would like to see in the budget. But again, it's a mandate from the state. No surprise to anyone here, utility costs have also risen. You know what's happened at the gasoline pump. The school district is not immune from that fact. We've had to build that into our budget too. We do have a long-range capital asset preservation plan and a plan for replacing our vehicles, principally our school buses. That's a factor in the budget. And of course, the consumer price index is also a factor. The budget that we proposed for this year comes to a bottom line of came to a bottom line of a 6.9% spending increase when we first proposed it to the board. But the board said to us, go back, sharpen your pencils, and bring us a reduction from that level. We did that with some success, and the board ultimately adopted a budget for next year of just over $75 million, which represents a 5.9% increase as it goes to the voters. Also in the budget brochure, you'll see pie charts which show you where the expenditures are. As you would hope in a school district program, most of our expenditures are for instruction. That's why the program portion of that pie chart is so large. The capital portion of the pie chart includes our expenses for debt service on the new buildings, and the administrative component includes all else. Let's go to the next one, Dick. Did you want to say something about these?
In each one of these, we just identified the distribution for various categories. This first one's administration. It would identify mainly the administration in the schools, the benefits associated with the administration, and also BOCES costs, or some of BOCES costs. The next is program. Program would be our direct instructional program, and in this case it's mainly teacher salaries. The benefits associated with that also would include special education and many other categories that are listed there and also in your handout. The last is capital. As John pointed out, in capital you'd see debt service, but we also have operation of plant and facilities in that area.
We have a special piece in this budget as well, something called the Excel project. And I'm going to ask Dick to describe it. He did much of the work informing the board about our options and leading to the point where we were able to recommend to the board the inclusion of this Excel project in the budget.
This is really a unique opportunity that we have. There's one time that we'll be able to utilize the Excel funds as far as we know. The dollars that we have would be $900,813 that's been allocated for the Byram Hills School District. The way it works is that those dollars have to be used for specific projects that would be eligible for this funding. It has to be a project related to technology or health and safety or something to deal with accessibility to the facilities, perhaps a physical capital expansion, or perhaps energy. One of those, though, it can't be used for other kinds of expenses. We looked at this and tried to figure out what would be the most important projects for us to use with this XLA. In our situation, after analyzing various kinds of needs that we had, we came up with 3 different programs. One would be upgrading and replacing our phone system and our public address system. These are outdated systems. They're really in need of replacement, and we thought this is a perfect one because it addresses both technology and safety. When we talked to the state about that, they agreed that it would be a project that would be eligible for XLA. Another is the emergency power backup system at the Crittenden Middle School. When we looked at this, we wanted to make sure that we have some kind of a facility in our district that could be fully operational in case that we do not have power. By using the Crittenden School for that, we would be able to, in an emergency situation, bring our students together in one facility that could be operational. The other thing is that it could be used for the Red Cross sheltering program, and that is the facility that's the primary facility for that type of experience. So that could be helpful as well for the town. And the last, and that, by the way, would be certainly a safety issue. The last would be the roof project. That fits in with energy, as well as safety to a certain regard. These 3 projects in total would account for $900,000 in terms of direct costs, but then we would have architectural and design costs, which account for about $100,000. We put the project together for $1 million. With this $1 million of expenditure, we'd be able to generate building aid at 10%, so there comes $100,000 back in building aid, and then the $900,000 in XL funding, so that in essence we can do these projects without having to have any kind of an assessment as far as taxes are concerned. This would be fully funded once we receive the aid from the state.
Dick, before you go on,
Yes.
let me just emphasize your last point. Dick said that this would have no impact on local tax. The money is already sitting in state revenue, but we can only access it if we submit it to a vote of the school district. So we're hoping people will see the wisdom of accessing this money, not least of all because we do not expect it to have any impact on the bottom line of tax rates.
And this item is a line item right in our budget, and it's explained in all of our budget materials. We're hoping with voter approval to be able to begin the XL projects this summer. We'd actually be able to replace the phone system, the PA system this summer, as well as do the roof work at Coleman Hill. Then the emergency power system, which is a little more complicated in terms of the design, that would be the following summer, again with voter approval of the budget. Another line item in the budget has to do with the closeout of our athletic project. As many of you will know, we had voter approval for the athletic project. The authorization was $6,240,190. That was done through 2 authorizations, one in 2003, the other in 2005. We now have completed the project. Our school community is enjoying the fields that we have, and we are at a point where we're totaling up all of the expenditures, and all of the expenditures for our accounting that needs to go to the state amounts to $6,136,000 and some change. As it turns out, we borrowed enough to equal $6.1 million. We could borrow another $140,000, and we have the authorization to do that. We need $36,000, but to go out and borrow for $36,000 is expensive. So instead, what we would prefer to do is to transfer some dollars that we have in the general fund over to our capital fund, but in order to do that, we have to get approval from the voters. So that's why this is a line item in the budget, recognizing the project came in under the authorization of the $6.2 million.
Thanks, Dick. Let's go on to the next slide. Debt service has been an important part of our budgets, not least of all because we've had to add facilities to accommodate our increasing enrollment and our commitment to class sizes. But what the district has been able to do with careful planning over recent years is to stabilize the debt service. You see Dick's bar chart here showing debt service payments from 2003 to 2012. What's become apparent is that we've been able to take all the debt service obligations outstanding in the school district and level them off. So that between a combination of annual revenues and expenditures from reserves, we know what that budget figure will be, and it's not going to increase in the foreseeable future. Here's another pie chart. School districts, according to law in New York State, have to have balanced budgets. So our revenue pie chart has to match our expenditure pie chart, our appropriations pie chart, at the bottom line. Unlike the state government, which is not obligated to do this, school districts have to match the bottom line of revenues. And no surprise, in Barham Hills, very little of our revenue comes from the state. Most of it is raised by real property taxes, about 88% of our revenue. The $75 million figure, again, matches the bottom line of our appropriations. This chart shows where all the revenues come from, really breaks out the pie chart in more detail. This is shown also in our budget brochure, which is arriving in everyone's mailboxes. Then you get to a more complicated part of the equation. We know that what taxpayers often care more about is what is my tax rate going to be for the coming year. Tax rates are decided, again, not so much by the local school district as by a formula that's set in Albany. And Dick gives the most elegant explanation of that formula I have ever heard, so I'm going to ask him to try to do that once again tonight.
On this chart, we have the total tax base for each one of our towns, North Castle, Newcastle, Bedford, and Mount Pleasant. All the way to the right would be the current tax base in terms of how we distributed the 2007-2008 budget. If you just look at North Castle, the tax base was $96.5 million and some change. What that means is if you took all of the assessed valuation for all the properties in North Castle, added it all together, you'd come up with $96,552,955. That's just the total of the assessments. One might ask, what's the real value of the property? And we're going to get to that in the next chart. The important thing is how North Castle changed from one year to the next. When we distribute next year's budget, instead of using $96,552,000 of the base, North Castle's total assessed valuation went to $98.4 million. And again, a little change. What that means is there's been some growth in North Castle. The good thing about growth is that it tends to mitigate then sometimes a tax impact. That certainly was to the advantage of the taxpayers in North Castle this year, and I'll explain what I mean by that. When you look at Newcastle, Bedford, and Mount Pleasant, they stayed very similar from one year to the next. You don't see that significant growth. Then we have to take into account what's called the equalization rate. Equalization is the relationship between assessed value and full value. And to make it simple, let's just talk about a piece of property that perhaps has a value of $1 million. And let's say that the equalization rate's 1%. If that's the situation, then the property is going to have an assessed value at $10,000, and yet it's worth $1 million. In the town of North Castle, maybe 2% is a better number for us to use. If it's 2%, that means a property that has an assessed value at $20,000 is going to be equal to about $1 million if we had a 2% assessed value in terms of equalization rate. Now it turns out that in North Castle, you look at 07-08, our equalization rate was 2.16. So what that means is our relationship between assessed value and full value was 2.16, which means a property, theoretically, would be valued at $21,600. So if you have a piece of property valued at $21,600, theoretically, it's worth about $1 million if you're using this relationship that I'm talking about in terms of it being valued at 21.6. Newcastle is less, Bedford, etc. But from one year to the next, North Castle went from an equalization rate of 2.16 to 1.9. It reduced significantly. What that means is the state is looking at that and they're saying, oh, if your assessed valuations decrease, then that must mean that your property is actually increasing more. It's more valuable from one year to the next. Otherwise, the equalization rate doesn't go down. That by itself wouldn't be a concern, but when you're servicing 4 towns, you have to ask yourself, well, what happened to the equalization rates for the other towns? When we look at that, Newcastle went down, but not at the same great percentage that North Castle did. Bedford also went down, but again, not as significantly. Mount Pleasant stayed the same at 1.4. What all of this means is that as a result of equalization rates and changes in equalization rates, the district, since it services 4 towns, has to distribute its budget on the basis of the total full value in our school district from each town. So we distribute our budget proportionately, larger proportion to North Castle, then a proportion to Newcastle, Bedford, etc. And if the value is going up for North Castle, that means North Castle is picking up a larger amount. But there's a good thing to this in terms of the growth in North Castle. Here's what North Castle looks like. It's picking up 86% of our budget. Newcastle would be actually decreasing. Bedford is decreasing. Mount Pleasant is also within that percentage. It's 12.6. It's just about the same. But let me show you one more chart. It actually decreased too, Mount Pleasant. Now you see how these relationships compare from one year to the next. North Castle, in terms of their percentage that's being serviced by our school district, increased by 1.3% from one year to the next. So the majority of our tax base is distributed to North Castle. Newcastle, Bedford, Mount Pleasant all decreased. Looking at tax rates, because North Castle actually increased in growth, the equalization rate was mitigated to a certain extent, and that shifting was mitigated to a certain extent, so that the tax rate in North Castle is an increase of 5.7%. Now think about our budget for a second. We said that the budget was 5.9% increase. Tax rate is a little bit less than the budget to budget. If North Castle hadn't grown in its assessments, this would have gone up quite a bit more because there was this shifting taking place. Newcastle, as it turns out, the increase in their tax rate is 3.3%. Bedford, it's actually a decrease in their tax rate next year, again because of the shifting. It's decreasing minus 0.38%. And the last is Mount Pleasant, a decrease of 5%. The interesting thing about this is you can look at budgets from one year to the next, and you can be in a community and you can see your tax rate, it's going up 11% or 12%, and yet the budget went up 6% or 7%. And it's because of shifts like this taking place between the tax base.
Dick, I'm sorry, the camera was off for the last few minutes. Can you just...
Oh, no. I'm sorry then. I wouldn't want to punish you.
I just want to tell the community that Dick, for those of you who haven't met Dick over the last couple of years, he's our interim assistant superintendent for business, and he's just done a masterful job on so many matters that we've asked him to do. And Dick, since you have an audience here, we want to thank you for all your hard work.
Can't resist saying, although the board obviously appreciates Dick, nobody appreciates his efforts more than Jackie Taylor and I. I hope taxpayers will appreciate his efforts too, to bring clarity to a very complicated matter. I'll simply underline Dick's bottom line by saying that about 85% of our students come from the town of North Castle. Not all of them have mailing addresses that are North Castle. Don't go by your mailing address. If you have some concern or question about where you pay your taxes, look at your tax bill. You may find that you have a Bedford address, but pay your taxes in North Castle. About 15% of our students come from Mount Pleasant, usually Pleasantville addresses, and only tiny fractions of our students come from Newcastle and Bedford. I think we've arrived at the point where we emphasize the steps from here, and really those steps are all informational. I mentioned that the budget brochure would be arriving in mailboxes soon. The school district also mails out a postcard, a very tight summary. And Dick, do you want to talk a little bit about what that is?
Sure. By law, we're required to send out what's called the school budget notice, and every school district will be sending that out. Ours will go out at the end of this week or early next week. It describes specifically what the current year's budget is, what next year's budget would be, and then we also have to put in that document what the contingency budget would look like. And that's the budget in case of a voter defeat. The contingency budget formula is one that we use, and everyone across the state has to use the same formula. We've calculated our contingency budget, and that will be on that document. The information also includes what the average homeowner would receive as far as, or an estimated average from the STAR exemption. In our case, it's a little less than $1,200 in terms of the amount of the STAR savings.
Thanks, Dick. We also mentioned Bobcat TV. Our budget special is available to anyone who wants to access Bobcat TV online. Jackie, Dick, and I have been taking turns attending the principals' coffees for in-person question and answer about budgets. And tonight is the final public opportunity at a board meeting to do just that. So I know that the president will momentarily invite questions on the budget. Later on, there's a portion of the agenda for other questions from the public.
I just want to, before I call for questions from the community, or from the board for that matter, remind the community that on May 20th, school budget vote, that is 2 weeks from tonight, actually 2 weeks from today, 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. Everybody votes at Crittenden for this. If you're in the Byram Hill School District, your voting booth is the H.C. Crittenden Middle School in the auditorium. And every year I'm just surprised by how many people say, I didn't know, or I didn't get anything about that. Nothing came to me in the mail. Well, something is coming to you in the mail. You're going to get the notice, you're going to get the postcard, and you're going to get some other things too, hopefully. So please, read the material that's sent. If you want to see the backup for the material, it's all available here in the district office. We encourage the electorate to be as informed as possible before they pull the ballot. And again, May 20th, 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. Vote at the Crittenden School. Don't go to your other November voting polling places. It's at the Crittenden School. So at this point, I would ask whether there are any questions on the budget from any members of the community. Everyone is pleased? Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question. It has to do with the equalization.
Just identify yourself, please, for our camera.
I live in Armonk.
Sure.
One question I have is the increase in the rate that's associated with Armonk. Is that because new houses have been put up, or because some grand vizier somewhere has decided that these houses that have existed forever are now worth more money?
How the equalization rate is determined is by the state. And what they do is they get sales data for the community. They do this for every community. They look at the sales data and then look at the assessments. And they establish a relationship between that year's sales data and the assessments and try to come back to what appears to be the relationship. So every year it will change based on the actual sales.
So that the value of your house is affected by the price that the guy next door gets?
Yes, in terms of equalization rates. But what has been happening in the town is the assessments haven't been changing. So even though that person's property value has been increased, and you can see that from the sale, if your assessment stays the same, then that means the relationship is going to continue to decrease between your assessment and full value.
We should say, though, that in North Castle in the last year, there has been some growth in total assessables that largely is from new construction.
Correct.
Any further questions from the community on the 2008-2009 budget, which will be put to the voters again on May 20th at Crittenden from 6:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night? Anything further? Any comments or questions from the board?
Sure.
By all means.
Which is that because I was interested in this increase in the budget of 5.9, and I went to the library and looked at the increases which various school districts in Westchester have. And it's not complete, but I had about 15, 16, 17 school districts. And of those, rating high to low, we were either third or fourth. Observation.
Ms. Ripstein, thank you for doing your homework on the budget and caring about it. I may be able to provide you with a more complete overview of school district budget changes. I'd be happy to give that to you. If you would email me one day this week, I'll send it right back to you. It shows all of the school districts in Westchester, Putnam, Rockland too, I believe. Not only the spending increases, but the tax rate increases. I think people who look at that whole table will feel that Byram Hills is in a good position.
John, talk also about the true tax rate.
Would you like to do that?
No.
That's why I asked you.
Mr. Kaplan is asking me to talk about true value tax rate. Think about all that Dick has said, but then also think about the fact that the tax rates vary from school district to school district, and that homeowners bear a burden in the tax rate, but other real property also carries some of the responsibility. Byram Hills is fortunate in that homeowners don't carry the whole tax burden. In fact, we have commercial property, and some of it you're familiar with, corporate headquarters in the area, for instance. But we also have, as one of our taxpayers, New York City, because of a large amount of watershed property in the school district. When you factor in these other contributors, the true value tax rate, particularly as it affects individual homeowners, comes out in a very favorable place. We also have a chart that's put together by the school boards in the area, again, the four-county area, which shows Byram Hills in the bottom quartile of true value tax effort. Great place to be. I'd be happy to share that chart with anyone who's interested.
Yeah. Okay, any further comments, questions from the community or the board on the budget? Well, this then concludes Budget Hearing 5. As the superintendent said, it's a process that began in January. And I think I can speak on behalf of the board and say we believe we have a very responsible and proactive budget to put to the voters. And again, May 20th, 6:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. at the Crittenden School.
Of course.
Well,
It also mentions the opportunity to get absentee.
yes, Rick makes a good point. If you're not going to be in town on May 20th for any reason, good, bad, or indifferent,
Your kids.
or your college-age students, 18 years of age or older, they're eligible and you're eligible for absentee ballots, we encourage them. Please contact Dick LaSalle, and he will be able to discuss that with you more. Absentee ballots are perfectly legit. We count them just like every other vote. And if you are going to be out of town, please, it's important that the absentee ballots come in.
The other thing is people don't have to be registered to vote.
Right. If you're not a registered voter, if you're not a Democrat, Republican, Independent, we don't really care. We don't care what party you're in. We just care that you lived here for 30 days before the vote, and you can have a passing knowledge of the English language.
And you're educated on the vote, because we want
and you're educated in the vote.
voters.
And no felony convictions.
And the point being is that, and you're right, you're U.S. citizens. There are a number of people in North Castle who really are not U.S. citizens, and sometimes they come and they realize they can't vote on the budget. But if you pass these pretty easy-to-pass tests, you're eligible to vote on the budget. So the fact you haven't registered to vote in a general election for the last 20 years, we're not going to tell anybody, but you can register to vote pretty quickly to vote on the budget. So we encourage you to do that and then take care of the other registration yourself. So I'm not going to say again when it is, but it is between 6:30 a.m. and 9 p.m. at the Crittenden School on May 20th. Okay, at this point, I would call for any comments from the public on matters not on the agenda and not dealing with any individual personnel matters, which, as most of you know, are not a proper comment at a school board meeting. Anyone wish to address the board?
I would.
Please identify yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Sharon Friedman. I live in North Castle. I'm here on behalf of many parents who are also here in support of Tori Bernstein. I realize that she was not granted tenure.
Ma'am, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I wanted to address
I'm
you.
sorry, we cannot, in a public meeting, discuss any individual personnel matters.
May I make some comments?
No, this is simply not, it is contrary to the law of the state of New York. We cannot hear it in a public meeting. Any comments that you may have regarding the tenure position of any candidate for tenure, please communicate in writing to the Board of Education or the superintendent. We may not discuss these. We may not hear about them in public meeting. It violates a number of rules and a number of laws. I'm sorry, we just can't hear it.
There's a state law that prohibits us
Yes.
from talking to you?
Yes. Excuse me.
I'm just asking.
I'm saying, when it comes to individual personnel matters, we may not discuss the individual personnel status, good, bad, or indifferent, about any particular tenure candidate.
That's fine. And if you don't want to discuss it, can you hear it?
No.
I just had another
So
question.
there's a New York State law that says you can't hear it.
There is a.
If there is, there
Go
is.
ahead.
Let me help by saying that the board over the years has taken great pains to try to solicit actually parent input about tenure candidates. The board has tried to comply with state education law in the manner in which that opportunity is offered. People can comment to a Board of Education member outside the setting of a public meeting, or can write letters formally to the Board of Education. And annually, our experience is that people do that. It's much appreciated, and it does become a factor in tenure decisions for candidates. However, as the board president has said, New York State education law prohibits the discussion of any employee's performance in a public meeting. The board is responsible to conduct such discussions in executive session. In doing so, they frequently do have input from parents, from other faculty, even from students. Anyone is welcome to write. So we need to ask you to understand that the board is simply following New York State education law.
So again,
Sir, could you identify yourself, please?
I'm Chris Siege. I have 4 children in the district. I moved to Armonk in 1973. I went through Wampus, Crittenden, the high school. I'm back.
Welcome. We're glad to have you back. We can't talk about individual personnel
I
matters.
understand you say you can't talk about it. The question is there a New York State law against you listening to what people have to say? The law states you can't listen. I've heard this, you can't discuss, and that I understand. But you say you can't listen to
In a
it?
public session, it may not be elicited or solicited.
You're not soliciting. I walked in.
No,
I didn't
we
know you were-
cannot hear it in the context of a public meeting. In fact, we can't hear good things or bad things about individual personnel achievements or debits or demerits on behalf of any candidate in a public meeting. It is.
The New York State law says you can't listen. I understand you can't discuss, but the New York State law says you can't listen.
We cannot hear it. Look, it is simply the law, and it's simply something we must follow.
Okay.
And as difficult as it is, we will, if you wish to be heard on this matter, please contact the superintendent, and if necessary and if appropriate, perhaps we can arrange to have an executive session where we can hear from the community, but we cannot do it in the context of a public meeting. Excuse me. Yes, ma'am.
Well, excuse me. The meeting will end this evening. At the end of it, will you listen?
At the end of the meeting?
Well, in other words, at some point the meeting will end and all of the regulation will come to a halt, correct?
At some point, we will conclude the public meeting.
Okay. So at that point,
Yes.
would you listen to some concerned parents that have shown up to speak to the Board of Education?
Can I just
5
say
minutes.
that the board has consistently invited that sort of input from parents and has received letters over time. Folks who are here tonight would have an opportunity to write letters to the board also, if you've not already done so, and the board then would be able to consider your point of view.
Okay, so I guess, again, I'll just ask. When the meeting ends, would you be willing to listen briefly?
get the letters, make a judgment for future executive.
If the answer is no, that's fine.
No, the answer is that the way we changed the, let me back up. Before a few years ago, there really was no material way for parents to have input in the tenure process. We changed that to get parent input vis-a-vis letters, correspondence, which we found to be valuable. We believe that is the most valuable way to evaluate input from the community. When we have those letters and we have an opportunity to evaluate them, at that point, if the consensus of the board is we wish to hear additionally from parents in executive session, we will reach out to you and invite you to come to executive session.
So tonight you're unwilling to stay after and talk to me for 5 minutes?
It's not a question of talking to you. It's a question of the process that we've put in place to solicit, excuse me. It's the process we've put in place to solicit input on tenure. This is a process that's published every year in Spectrum and other locations, and that's how we invite it. And it's been consistent, and we have received, as the superintendent said, input on that, and we've interpreted and used that input together with, obviously, the advice and consent of the administration. So that is where we are. We prefer to get the comments from parents or community members in writing, and then if we believe an executive session is appropriate, we will ask you to come to one. That's our position. Yes, ma'am, I saw you next. Just identify yourself, please.
It sounds like a no to me.
Linda Fernberg, I know you're going into executive session after this. That's per the agenda, Mr. Fernberg?
I believe we have some executive session matters.
In answer to your question, we have another portion of the meeting to go to.
Oh.
That's not open
Can
to
we,
the public.
can we,
No, it's not open to the public at this point in time. Not on the agenda. We haven't made an appointment to do such.
The executive session meeting is not open to the public. To the extent the board wishes to hear from community members in executive session, community members may be invited to them, but it's simply not something you stroll in and discuss executive session items with the board. That I can tell you is true.
I understand.
Sir, you've got to wait your turn, please.
okay.
I was just hoping to help explain that. I have one question about meeting people individually, because I've tried that in the past with a different issue, and we were told that we couldn't meet with people individually. I don't know if it's because the issue was different, or people didn't, it just wasn't acceptable.
I'm not sure I can respond to. I'm not sure what you're saying.
Meeting with board members?
Board members?
Yes.
Individually?
Yes. They would.
Understand that board members individually really have no power to do anything unless we are in a properly convened meeting. When we're in a properly convened meeting, either public session or executive session, that's when we act as board members.
I was just asking, because you said meeting with different members of the board privately. And I had that question because I've tried that
You can
before,
accumulate
and-
information on your own as long as you're
But I
not
was-
together.
You
My
always
point
have the opportunity to contact any board member. Board members' telephone numbers and email addresses are published in the calendar. You also have an opportunity to contact any member of the administration. On a personnel matter, the rules for procedure are somewhat different than they might be for other matters. But people could contact any board member individually, or Dr. Taylor or me on any personnel matter. And that might help make a decision about whether the board would choose to entertain further comment on a subject of personnel in a future executive session.
But if I could just clarify that, if you contact individual board members, it should not be with the expectation of a discussion, because we are not free to discuss individual personnel in any setting, really, except executive session when we're all convened together.
I understand. That explains the...
And that's one of the reasons, frankly, why the board has asked for input in writing, to avoid the confusion that might come from one person calling one board member and offering input. Written input is always more consistent and understandable.
And an email to one board member.
It's shared.
Right.
Shared.
We circulate that among board members.
Well, many of us here tonight are here on behalf of Dr. Bernstein. And many of us have already signed a letter that Dr. Taylor answered in your absence, and welcome back. Thank you. So, would it be possible to set up a meeting? Is that inappropriate?
Based on what the board has seen already?
No, the fact that there are many parents here who didn't know about the upcoming tenure issue, and then the decisions when it was made. So we feel that our input was not heard, and we'd like to be considered.
Yeah, I won't try to speak for the board here, but again, I'll emphasize that everybody has the opportunity to write a letter.
So let's get together and talk.
Excuse me.
I'm just saying.
Excuse me, so this isn't a coffee shop debate. You know, we have, this is a public meeting, and people have to take turns speaking. Ma'am, you're next.
I didn't finish.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
No, I want to know, if we were invited by Dr. Taylor to call her, which we didn't do, many of us, but can we please make a meeting?
Well, we're going to let Dr. Taylor speak since she was kind enough to answer your letter. And then I'd like to come back and try to answer a little more, Linda.
As I said in my letter, if you wish to call me or come in, I'd be happy to meet with a group of you. I have spoken to many of you. I have shared your input with the board and with Mr. Chambers. You have been heard. I've spoke to some of you for quite a very long time. So we can certainly meet. It's always our desire to have good communication and for you to feel honored and respected. That said, I believe many of you know I have spoken to you at great length already. If some of you would like to come in and speak to me again, I'd be happy to meet with you. But I really want to say your input has been given to the board. We took it under sincere consideration. And as I shared with many of you, in Spectrum, it outlines all the rules for these kind of judgments. So, you know, if we need to do that again, I'm happy to do that. I very much want you and your children to feel respected and honored in our school district.
Thanks, Jackie. Linda, just in further response to your question, Jackie said part of what I was going to say, that the board really does value parent input, and we've received a lot of it. Although we can't discuss an individual staff member here, I will say, as Dr. Taylor implied, a lot of input has come around one staff member. I want to point out, though, that as we say annually in public meetings and in our publications, as we invite parent input, we take care to say that that is one factor in the evaluation that the administration makes in ultimately making its recommendations to the Board of Education. That's an important factor, but is by no means the only factor. Dr. Taylor, every year when our new classes of faculty members come in, spends careful time telling them that they will be evaluated on the quality of their relationships with all Byram Hills constituencies. Obviously, not least among them are students, but also parents and also collegial relationships. Another factor in the evaluation of staff members is direct observation by administrators trained and charged with that responsibility. Byram Hills has a very extensive process for these formal evaluations, write-ups, observation reports, and annual written evaluations as well. All of that combines toward the end of the probationary period to lead to a possible tenure recommendation. Sometimes we don't get to a tenure recommendation. Sometimes we have a resignation. And I urge you to look back in this particular case at the record. Then when it comes time for a recommendation, if indeed candidate wants to be considered for tenure, New York State education law also provides that ultimately the superintendent either recommends for tenure to the board and then the board decides, or the superintendent decides not to recommend for tenure. In a case where the superintendent does not recommend tenure, I'm talking generically now, not specifically about any candidate, Board of Education doesn't even have an opportunity to vote. That's New York State education law. I think it's a wise law, especially when you have an evaluation process that considers as many factors as the one in Byram Hills does. So please, as you're thinking about what kind of input you want to have to the board or what kind of input you've already had, consider it in that larger context. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Please identify yourself, please.
Sorry, I'm Liz Freund.
I'm enjoying this very much. Thank you for having us. My big question for everybody, which is true, being somebody who doesn't necessarily understand the rules of how everything works, coming from the point of one person, knowing one person, not seeing the other side of it all, it's very hard when, as a parent, when we see one side and we're not privy to the information that's being presented, that clearly something was made, a decision was made on the other end. It's very hard. We could write all the letters we want, but if a decision has been made about something that we're not allowed to be privy to, it's very complicated, and it's frustrating because we feel very strongly about something.
Understood your point, and also understand that the information available vis-a-vis personnel records obviously are confidential.
Right.
And they're not part of the public record, and they're available to a relatively small group of people,
Exactly.
many of whom are charged with making the initial tenure determinations that the superintendent said. And you're right, as a parent, or as a student, or as a non-board member, you don't have the full picture, and you're not allowed to have it, and I understand why that would add to a sense of frustration, but understand, on the other hand, why these personnel matters are treated confidentially. Because there's well, I think hopefully for obvious reasons as to why someone's personnel file would be, personnel matters would be treated confidentially, and that a decision such as tenure is simply by New York State law not open to a popular vote. You know, it's a serious process. Byram Hills, the tenure process has really, in the last 10 years, it's just undergone, I think, a rigorous improvement, really spearheaded by with Dr. Taylor, and you know, overall, that's what's been in place now, and we as the board, as the superintendent said, we only get involved when there is a positive recommendation.
So how do we rest when we see great value of somebody, not only on an individual basis, but for an entire district?
I guess my answer. My answer to you is, it's a good question. My answer to you is, unfortunately, you don't get to have the final say, and I don't mean that in a pejorative or nasty way. What I mean to say is that what your job is to give us the input. Your job is to give us the input, and then it's really up to those people who are charged by law and charged by the district to make those determinations, whom actually have to make those decisions. It's not a decision made by a community. It's not a decision made by parents or students. It's a decision made by an administration based on input from department chairs, based on input from colleagues. It's an entire rubric that's in place that ultimately results either in a positive or a negative decision, which, as I said, comes to us only when there's a positive recommendation. So it's simply not possible for parents or students to get involved in the tenure process much as you might get involved in talking to many other people who interact with your children on a daily basis. It's simply not that type of discussion. It's a legal one, it's a restrictive one, and it's one that's in place ultimately, we believe, for the benefit of the students and the benefit of the community
and the teachers,
and the teachers, and professional educators who make these decisions and who come to us with their recommendations. We understand your point, and it's not, and believe me, it's one we take seriously, and that's why when Dr. Taylor said that all the written comments we received were taken to heart, she means it, and we mean it. We don't take this stuff and just say, another letter. Letters and written communications that come from the community of the board have input. I mean, if someone takes the time to write and express their views, we're going to take the time to read it and treat it seriously. So please understand that. When we changed the rules and said, please, we want parent input on tenure, we didn't do it as a sham. We didn't do it to make an illusory process. We did it because we felt the process needed that, and we still do. But ultimately, the decision is made here, and the recommendation is made here, and it can't be made on the other side of the table.
Can I just add one point to that? Following on, and I recognize your frustration, and I appreciate it. and you want to know, well, gee, what if we disagree? Well, we're saying you don't have all the information to form a complete opinion, and it's very frustrating. But the person that has standing to challenge the board decision is the individual involved in any such case. And so that's just the role that you are in as a member of the public in providing input into the process, but you don't have standing on the other end of it to challenge the board decision that way. It's the individual.
We recognize that there are truly sincere, deep feelings on this issue. And no one is saying otherwise, and no one is treating them other than, as Dr. Taylor said, with the respect they deserve. But please understand that the process was and is being followed here. The process that's required to be followed is being followed, and it's being followed very meticulously, as we do with all candidates. You know, everybody gets treated in the process. Nobody got, and I'm talking generally. The tenure process is followed carefully, and Dr. Taylor, I believe, would be the first to say that it's a rigorous process that applies to everybody, equally. And that's really it. And that's really it. So, oh, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Donna Gordon, I live in the Environmental School District. I just have a question. I appreciate all the information. If I may ask that if a decision's already been made to not grant a teacher tenure for whatever reason, has the board ever reversed a decision then?
I can answer this.
Is it possible for us to be heard and have something good come out?
I can answer this, and I'm going to try to answer it carefully. If the superintendent does not recommend for tenure, there's nothing for the board to reverse. With the Board of Education, it simply does not come to the board. It is not a matter for us to act on. Whether it is or it isn't, and it's in a situation, speaking generally, where there is a negative recommendation, we don't get it. The only way we get it, I suppose, is to get a new superintendent. But if you think about the wisdom, right, we don't want that either.
Well, that's happening already.
If you think about the wisdom, think about the wisdom behind it, where something as important as tenure, which is defined as a property right, is treated seriously and really shouldn't be at the whim of, it shouldn't be done at whim. Ma'am, just identify yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm Faith Lorenzo, and I just wanted to, in response to what you just said, so our communications to the board then not directed at the right party? Because it wouldn't even come to you then, right?
No, your communications to the board get forwarded immediately to the superintendent. Anything that's sent to the community, to any board member, will find its way to the superintendent, to the deputy.
But I guess what I'm saying is, maybe we're just directing the communications in the wrong way, because if the board and the superintendent are never going to consider tenure for a person because the issue, if we never got to that step, it just seems like, who's supposed to hear it then?
Well, let the superintendent respond to that, maybe Dr. Taylor too.
Let me try to clarify on several fronts. First, any written input that any member of the community provides to Jackie Taylor as our deputy superintendent or to me is shared with the Board of Education. Likewise, any written input that a member of the community shares with the Board of Education, we also see. So there's a completion of that communications loop.
No, I understand that part.
Let me go further and come back to your question. Let me also say, in my time in Barham Hills, I've been very satisfied with the rigor of our evaluation process for probationary staff members. I've been very pleased with the system that was in place when I came here, the leadership that Dr. Taylor has given to that system, the seriousness with which it's taken by all members of the staff. Probationers who are themselves being evaluated, the administrators who are in charge of evaluation, the non-evaluative support that's provided to new staff members by mentors who don't have anything to do with the evaluation, but give that opportunity to grow in another special way. I've also been pleased by the seriousness of the Board of Education in approaching matters of probationary judgments and tenure judgments. I do not and cannot discuss an individual tenure matter here in a public setting. But I will say to you that again this year, I am fully persuaded that the board has faithfully considered all the input to the process, that the administrators have faithfully performed their responsibilities, and that to this point of the school year, the actions already taken by the board on tenure, or the actions already taken by the board in matters of resignation, and the matters still to be acted upon in the coming weeks, have all been very carefully considered. I've seen all the input in all of those matters from parents. Let me be very clear, I cannot imagine other input at this point that would change my mind about a recommendation to the Board of Education in the remainder of our school year.
Okay, I have no question about the process, or I have full faith in this board. I just wanted to make sure, because I was a little unclear as to when you were saying it doesn't go to the board because we never got to the question of tenure.
The board never votes. No, they're never.
Right.
The only entity that can grant tenure is the board.
Right.
We can only grant it if the superintendent recommends it.
Correct. And the superintendent has to rely on the administrator. So my question was, if I didn't know if our timing was wrong and if our message was being sent to the right person, because it seems like this is something that already took place, and maybe we're, and our input is coming in after the fact.
We have received significant input on this prior to the time that there was recommendations made.
Fine, so would it be fair to say that really our presence and the letters, it's all, at this point, we've done our job by communicating our feelings, and now the rest is left up to you?
I think it'd be very fair.
I think that's well said. Ma'am, just identify yourself, please.
Hi, Debbie Roche. Me?
There's a camera over there, just say hello.
Okay. My name is Debbie Rochelle. To elaborate on that, I just found, like, for example, I just found out about the Dory Bernstein tenure matter 9 o'clock last night. So
let's go forward for a second. Let's just call it an individual personnel matter. And let's not deal with people by name. It happens to be very important.
Okay. So to the extent, I know that what has been communicated up until this point, to get to the point where the superintendent would recommend to the board tenure or not, a lot of us were completely unaware. So I don't know that you have fully considered, I know you've fully considered whatever you've received in writing thus far, but there are a good number of us who had no idea this was even an issue that was out there. So I found out at 9 o'clock last night. I feverishly wrote a letter today because I was flabbergasted that it was even, I had no idea. So there are people, like, to the extent people would have been aware that this was even out there, you may have gotten, a ton more feedback
Let the superintendent respond to that.
pushback.
Let me go back to what I was describing before as the total picture of staff evaluation and ultimately recommendations on a continuation of probationary staff. Let me say that the opportunity that the board provides is published twice annually. And, I'm always sorry when some people don't see that. But I also need people to understand that for all the fact that the board invites that input and the administration considers that input, it is but one factor in the evaluation process. And for me, as a superintendent of schools, for me as a high school principal earlier in my career, for me as a teacher earlier in my career, it was never about the volume of input. It was never a popularity contest. In cases where we have already received input, it's been eloquent. But because we're not talking about a plebiscite here, not a popularity contest, I frankly cannot imagine, and again, I don't want to discuss an individual circumstance, I can't imagine at this point of the year additional input that would change my view of the recommendations I'm making to the board on the whole set of our probationary teachers.
Okay, but to the extent there are a great number of people who find a specific candidate to be invaluable. I mean, and I really, those are my words, and I can't imagine, my children transitioning up to Wampus without an individual and to the extent a lot of people, and suppose there were a great majority of parents in the district who had the same feeling, who had not been able to communicate it, not knowing, again, the other end, the other side, as to why somebody is not being considered. And again, I know you have your, there are procedures in place that you also take into account. To the extent, and I'm not calling it a popularity contest, to the extent there are so many people who truly feel strongly about somebody's value to the schools, to the district, to the children in the community, I don't know how you can call it a popularity contest, because it's not, I like this person better than that person. There's a person that we truly feel strongly about, and we have no idea why there is another side at all. I mean, really.
Unfortunately, that's right. That's right, you don't, and you can't. And there's nothing I can say to make it any better. I just can't make it any better. You don't, and you can't, and we couldn't do it, and if somebody told you about it, they'd be breaching an oath of confidence they took. It's just the procedure in place, and it can't make you happy, and I know that, but we got to be straight with you. Okay. That's just simply the way these things work, and as much as we don't like to see people leave meetings unhappy, it's more important to us that people leave meetings understanding what was done, understanding the procedure and the process. And as the superintendent said, we have high confidence that the process was properly followed. So with that said, believe it or not, we have several hours of work ahead of us. To those of you who came on this issue, we heard you, and we thank you. Please take it to heart what the superintendent, what the administration said, and we're going to move forward now with our agenda. Thank you. Thank you very much. We're going to take a 3-minute break at this point. We're all back? Welcome back. May I have a motion, please, to adopt tonight's agenda?
So moved. Second.
Okay, any changes? Okay, motion, all in favor of the agenda, please? Motion, please, to adopt tonight's consent agenda. Second. All in favor? I note on tonight's consent agenda, we have a teacher resignation of one Ellen Franzoso, who had the delightful pleasure of teaching my son.
Watch the tears. Watch my tears.
Some 15 years ago. And let me call on the deputy superintendent.
Well, Ellen submitted her resignation, and we were all very surprised. And Ellen, and to your husband, thank you for being here. We will miss you a great deal. But from what I understand, you have great adventures in your life ahead. You have been a very good staff member, committed to serious continuous improvement. You've embraced many initiatives over the last years. As I've come to know you and visited your classroom, I see your deep commitment to the children and how you really have tried to attend to each individual need. So on behalf of the district, we wish you very, very good fortune in your new life, and you will be missed.
We will miss the teddy bears.
That's right.
And I remember that, and the whistles. But most of all, Ellen, we will miss your dedication to the children. And on behalf of your many, many excellent years of service to Byram Hills, we congratulate you. Thank you very much. Okay, moving forward, I guess that brings us to new business. One of the board goals this year is a continuing work of the board in the area of cultural proficiency. And let me turn this to the superintendent.
Dr. Taylor has spearheaded her work on this goal, but she's had lots of help from lots of people. And some of those people were kind enough to agree to come out tonight and help give the board an update on progress on this goal. Dr. Taylor, I see, is getting up a little visual aid in the process. But Jackie, is this the point where you wanted to bring some of these people forward?
Thank you, John.
So let's invite those staff members, in fact, some parents too, who have agreed to come and help us tonight. Can you bring a chair forward and kind of close the circle with the board table?
Thank you.
We may have to get creative and make that circle a little fishbowl effect inside the board table. How's that lining up, Jackie?
Course or something?
I know.
No, look who showed up. Where are these people hiding? Where are they?
You're good right there. The camera can get you there.
It really is a great honor to present this work to the board and the board community. Approximately 4 years ago, we had a discussion at a board meeting and many discussions at our administrative cabinet meeting and faculty meetings about whether Byram Hills was an inviting place for teachers of color. And that's how the conversation began. And we were concerned that we were not able to attract or recruit teachers of color. And we still have that serious problem. We have very few teachers of color in our school district, and we feel that's a very important goal of role modeling for our children. We worked with regional groups and personnel to see what we might be able to do about that fact. And we came to understand that it is indeed a regional problem. As I've said many times, Westchester County has a severe teacher and administrative shortage. Add on, trying to attract teachers of color to a district that appears to be homogeneous. It's not necessarily the first place that a teacher of color wants to come and devote their career to. We began to puzzle through that issue more and more, and we thought we needed advice. We were very fortunate 3 years ago to meet Dr. Brenda and Franklin Campbell-Jones. I really invite anybody who has not seen, now that Bobcat TV is available to everybody in our community, there is an Ask Dr. Jackie show that features Brenda and Franklin Campbell-Jones. I really invite you to that, really, to see Brenda and Franklin and see the language and the kind of work that they have been helping us to achieve. They are extraordinary experts in this field. There's very few people like them in the country. We've contacted many organizations, and they're really extraordinary. And I think tonight everybody who's worked with them will really celebrate this work. I know some of our board members have had a great opportunity to work with them. What have we done? In the last 3 years, we've trained about 75 teachers over 2 days. Every administrator in the district has been trained and had a focus for 4 days with Brenda and Franklin. We did something that I felt was a little risk-taking. We had workshops that had parents and teachers together, learning together. Why is that risky? Because the topic of race, religion, gender differences, cultural differences are very hard to talk about. And I was concerned that biases and assumptions might be hurtful to each other. And it's one thing for a staff to talk about them or a parent group to talk about, but to mix groups, I was concerned, how would that go forward if we hurt each other? Or we misspoke and said things that were hurtful to different people in our group. Well, through our very skillful facilitators, we have learned how to talk about very difficult issues to each other. What I've learned personally is it's okay to stumble. it's better to take the risk than to not talk about the topic. And that people of goodwill will appreciate the stumbling rather than the silence. So what have we been trying to do together? This work, really, it's no less than changing the world. And I think our world, I don't have to talk more about why our world needs to be changed and why we need to have deep respect and care and commitment to each other. So we're very realistic that what Byram Hills is engaged in is a lifelong work. It's a very reflective work. As the quote says, we're tackling a very difficult societal complex problem, which is how do we live together? How do we respect each other? How do we speak to each other with deepest care for and about our differences? We've learned that, like a lot of things in life, it takes a single action to make a difference. And we're hoping that the synergy we're creating in Byram Hills is indeed making a difference. I'm sorry, we had a student who was going to join us tonight, and as life would have it for Byram Hills Senior, he can't be here tonight. And that's my one regret tonight, because I think the voice of a student would have added. But we have had over 100 students work with Brenda and Franklin, and that is our goal, to increase the number of students, because we know that students are the heart of the change we wish to see. That said, adult role modeling for students is critical in this work. Every time we tell a religious joke, a sexual joke, a racial joke, a sarcastic comment, we send a message to our kids about what we believe in. And so we've tried to really monitor our language and learn to hold ourselves accountable to the deepest level of care. And it's hard. It's really hard, because we all live in a culture that's used to jokes and kidding and hurtful things about each other. But we are trying to do better for and with each other. So just to give you a little, and I'm very proud of this work. I'm proud to be part of a district that takes this seriously. I applaud the board for allowing us to do all the things that are on the board's agenda, to keeping this as a high priority goal. And what we're trying to accomplish is valuing diversity, recognizing our differences, and how we respond to them. What I want to say, the great work that Brenda and Franklin have brought to us is that they help us see that we are different in Byram Hills. When we entered this work 3 years ago, we used to say, and you'll see I'm talking slowly because I've learned to be very careful how I speak about this work. We used to say, well, we're all alike. After all, most of us are white. We've learned that, first of all, that is hurtful to our friends, teachers, students of color. Secondly, we're not all alike. We're very different. We have very different cultural backgrounds. We have very different political views. We've learned from talking to each other and from our students, we've also learned that Byram Hills is a lot more diverse than we even thought in terms of the students that are living in our district, the cultures that exist in Byram Hills. It's not as we envisioned 3 years ago. So learning, students, the days that I've spent at the high school, listening to individual student stories, I have to say I was really amazed at how many students said, well, I come from Pakistan, I lived in India, I'm a Muslim. I'm afraid to even tell my friends where I came from. And in these very safe environments, kids began to reveal their differences. And it's heart-wrenching work, but it's really important work. Because our goal, and you'll know I'll get weepy about this topic, because it's so wonderful to care so deeply when our kids validate, and some of the faculty that are here, and parents, who applaud and say, I'm proud to be part of this. It just feels great. So, we are seeking opportunities to celebrate our differences in different cultures. I really need to say, we're also at a very early stage in this work. We have miles to go. But this is an update of where we are. A big part is learning effective strategies for seeing conflicts and really understanding our cultural backgrounds. And I wish, and also as adults, recognizing that we have mental models, mindsets of prejudice and stereotypes of each other, and trying to surface them and be reflective about them, and then trying to create new thoughts and new behaviors. I wish Dr. Patterly in the middle school, most of the people who would have liked to be here are in Washington tonight. And then develop skills cross-cultural. That's the hardest part, I think we've learned, how to speak about this work. We're in a journey to examine our curricular work, make sure that we have all cultures represented in our reading materials and in our historical documents, scientific documents, art, music.
How realistic is that?
How realistic is to
examine curricular materials and pedagogy to ensure that cultural differences are equitably addressed. How reasonable is that within the confines of the state curriculum? It's a good question.
It's a good question. I think it's very reasonable, though, in the sense that it will take us many years, but we're doing it slowly at different levels. So, for instance, the English department, and Bill can speak, Jen and Lamia were here tonight, they took a look at all the reading materials for the entire 9-12 reading program and recognized that we can add books, we can subtract some books. At the Joy can speak to a way that the Fine Arts Department is looking at works of art, music, to make sure we're celebrating. And we're not afraid to say we're celebrating different cultures. At the elementary school, Deidre and I spoke earlier today, and Betsy Eininger would have been here, but except for a family emergency. The second grade in particular has looked at all their reading and their writing assignments to make sure. So yes, the state has a set of standards, but the materials we use are, to a great extent, is our choice. I'm going to skip through these because I really want you to hear from these wonderful people that are here tonight. This is the heart of the work. It has to do with, and I'm going to go through each slide because you've had it in your packet and it's late already. It's really to identify where we are as individuals on a continuum, from cultural destructiveness to cultural proficiency. And the work that Brenda and Franklin promote suggests it's a very individual journey first. You have to recognize where you are on the continuum, and then you have to make a very conscious effort to move forward. So enough of my speak. What I'd like to do, and everybody here is prepared to speak to what this work has meant to them. They're going to be brief. What this work has meant to them, and something they've done in their either teaching or in their school to promote this work. I asked Kim and Tim to join us in this circle. You can either speak or not speak. And Marie also. It will start with, and could you introduce yourselves as you speak to the board? We'll start with Marlene and Ken.
Okay, I'm Ken Pearson. I'm the string teacher and general music teacher at 3rd grade at Wampus.
And I'm Marlena Roberts, music teacher at Wampus also.
And I'm going to start by giving a very, very brief overview of how we were introduced to cultural proficiency. Barbara Topio and Angela Garcia asked Marlena and I if we would be interested in participating in a special workshop. The focus would be on cultural proficiency. Marlena was very excited about the workshop and the opportunity for a different type of change to take place. I, on the other hand, was reluctant. I didn't know whether the intent of asking my participation was to show that we, meaning the district, have 1 or 2 black teachers, so we're basically okay. Or are they committed to making a difference and bringing about ethnic and cultural change? To further complicate it for me, when I noticed the 2 presenters were black, I felt even more pressure for the presenters to conduct a great workshop. Once the workshop started and I saw how knowledgeable and aware and practical Brenda and Franklin were, it changed my whole view of this experience. By the end of the workshop, I had made a quiet decision within myself to become an active participant to bringing cultural change to the district.
At Wampus, we were forming focus groups that would meet during our faculty meetings. Barbara asked if Ken and I would be interested in running one on cultural proficiency. We would hold 3 one-hour sessions with people that chose to be in our group. And in order to inform people about our topics, each group leader created a one-minute pitch to hook people, which Barbara called speed baiting, which we like that name. Every faculty member was put in their first or second choice, which gave cultural proficiency 5 teachers. We learned so much from Brenda and Franklin that we had to decide the key points to address and then determine what our outcomes would be. So we called the masters, and we called Franklin for assistance, and he gave us pointers on starting our first session and told us to keep it simple and move slowly. We decided we wanted to include lesson plans for each teacher in case they wanted to try something with their classes after our sessions. So each teacher received a packet after sessions 1 and 2, a copy of the book, The Cultural Proficient School by Franklin, and also the DVD of the Ask Dr. Jackie show, just to give them some perception because we had trouble. We were trying to convey who they were and what they were doing, but having them not see it, it was difficult. So we're like, here, watch this. It was great. It was an amazing experience presenting in small part to the entire faculty and then to our group. The biggest thing we learned is that we need more conversations on cultural proficiency, and people are very uncomfortable talking about it. Everyone always agrees that we need more diversity in Byram Hills, but we found people struggling talking about the various groups we currently have for fear of offending. Our sessions led to amazing discussions, and every participant wanted more information and training, and some even attended this year's session with Brenda and Franklin.
In terms of cultural proficiency in the district, and I guess how I see it, I believe the district goal of obtaining cultural and ethnic diversity is very important in today's society. Parents have spoken to me at length about how much they love living in the Byram Hills community, but the one area of concern for them is the lack of ethnic exposure for their children. I believe the district understands the concerns that parents have and is actively trying to identify, recruit, and employ more teachers of color. I believe in time, Byram Hills will become more of a microcosm of our society at large. Through cultural awareness, we will help our students understand that the decision makers of our country, from the President of the United States to the administrators in our school system, are of all races. Cultural proficiency helps the teachers, students, and parents understand that the needs of people of color are different. And we as educators can teach our students to become allies for individuals who are not part of the financial and cultural mainstream.
And since our original training, I've changed how I look at people and especially how I teach. I had never attended a workshop where everyone was so emotionally touched that everybody hugged at the end of the workshop. It was the most bizarre thing. Parents, board members, and teachers, it didn't matter. Everyone was just hugging. It was great. I've incorporated a cultural theme to my teaching this year. My music classes have experienced music from other cultures, and we've had many non-music discussions, as my students like to call them, than ever before. I even had a 5th grade student thank me for teaching them about different cultures because they were leaving the country and they now knew to expect different colors and different voices and different sounds, and they knew that rather than have that nervous laugh, to just sit back, appreciate it, and take it in and not judge it. So that was a pretty emotional transaction for me this year to have a student actually thank me for something like that, which is my job. This past year I found that cultural proficiency is a topic that is easier for kids to discuss than adults, and I feel that we are already making a difference at Byram Hills, and by starting young, having continued open discussions and training, we can get there.
Hi, I'm Susie Michelle. I chair the Foreign Language Department in the district. And Ira, in response to your question about how we attend to cultural differences in our curriculum, the state and national standard curricula in foreign language includes culture as one of the goals. And so we have been focusing on culture in the Foreign Language Department forever. And it's been very worthwhile. And I have to say, for example, just to give you an example, in the French curricula, it's not that we read only French authors, but Caribbean and African authors, and we celebrate Hispanic, not Spanish from Spain, only authors, but even South American authors. The Italian's a little different, although we do look at Italian Americans as opposed to Italians in Italy, which is a totally different culture, take it from one who knows. Having grown up in an immigrant family myself, I am very aware of cultural differences. I myself have a lot of Haitian friends and Jamaican and South Americans, and have lived and traveled and studied in various European countries, 4 different European countries for a good portion of my life. So I like to consider it not so much as cultural proficiency, but perhaps cultural sensitivity or sensibility towards other people. And it's something that has to be ongoing. And I think as teachers, role modeling it for our kids is very, very important. I feel that in my position as a leader in the district, this whole workshop has been invaluable, because I think in any leadership position, we really have to look at people who are different as simply different, not deficient. We have to try and find the positive in them and cultivate that. And it's not something that can just be said. And it's really, I'm a real believer in action speaking louder than words. You can't just say, oh, we're really good friends. You're different and I'm different, and we're good friends, or I value you and your differences. It's really got to be ongoing, and I think it takes a lot of work. I don't think it takes work personally myself, again, because I think I've been immersed in so many different cultures all my life. But I think it's fantastic to get to know people from other cultures and who have a lot of differences. In fact, Brenda and Franklin did a little exercise with our group, and without our even knowing what the goal of that exercise was, I tended to gravitate towards people who were different instead of people who were the same as me, and that was actually the object, to see if you tend to gravitate towards people who are the same or people who are different. And if I just there's such a richness that you can really get from just meeting and being with people who are different, and just accepting them as that, different, and learning from them, like Jackie said before, and trying to get to know each other and understand each other. But again, it's not, it really takes action. It's not just a lot of fluff, a lot of hot air, so that's all. I could talk on and on about this. I actually love this topic. I'm grateful that we've had the opportunity to work on it, so.
Thank you. I'm just going to say very briefly that I'm here because I want to enthusiastically support and encourage the ongoing focus that we have here with the cultural proficiency throughout the district. It's such important work, and I'm so impressed on what has been done in these 3 years, K-12, to involve all areas, and how positive people are receiving the information and really valuing it and wanting to move forward and finding it important. So, great work.
In the Fine Arts Department, a large percentage of the teachers K-12 in art and music have been involved in the cultural proficiency training. And in conversations and curriculum meetings that we've had, one of the themes that has surfaced repeatedly is that many of the things we've learned through our Facing History initiative are supported and enhanced in the cultural proficiency discussions. And it's really opened a big door for us to review music, the arts, some of the projects we do, some of the curriculum initiatives and grant initiatives that we've presented from our department, to allow the students to enter in conversations about cultural elements that are more personal to them and begin down a road of discovery and creativity in that area. So I know in the music and the art program, it's really had a big effect on the curriculum projects that we develop for the students, and in some of the music that we even choose in the classroom. It's been really very positive experience.
I'm going to move to Deirdre. I know Kim and Tim will be okay because they're going to have a big presentation with Tri-States and just give them the time, if that's okay.
Okay, I'll actually talk about the music department because I think at Coleman Hill in particular, they do work with bringing music and celebrating different cultures from that point and from that aspect. Our children are really young, so we recognize the importance of, having conversations with children, but in a really appropriate manner. And sometimes with our little children, they're so honest that their comments come right out, and actually we see that as an opportunity for learning. So we have had experiences where children will say something inappropriate or notice a difference, and when they're upset, they might say something to the effect of, you know what, your eyes are different and I really want that ball. And and we have that. And what's so interesting is we take that negative experience and we turn it into a really, really powerful learning experience. Because sometimes it's more about the fact that the child has recognized a difference, and it's not so much meant to really, really make that child upset, but that it was something that stuck out in their mind or something that was very visual. And so at that moment, we just open those conversations and have that dialogue. And it's so important to have that dialogue and to open it up. And we've sat down with support staff members and said, okay, what do we do when these comments come about, and how do we handle it? And not to ignore it, because when we ignore it, we send the wrong message, and we need to send the right message. And this year, I have to say, all the teachers who participated in the cultural proficiency training have absolutely loved it and are extremely enthusiastic about it and are seeking more opportunities to continue their development. The continuum for me has also been extremely powerful, and being able to identify where you are on that. And teachers have also stated that as well. So the social studies curriculum, we have a wonderful opportunity because next year we're really starting to look at it and kind of organize our curriculum, but also do some purposeful and meaningful planning that really incorporates the cultural proficiency. Instead of saying we do this at this time in the month or we do this, but instead say, how can we have these discussions and throughout the year and really recognize and celebrate diversity and bring it to the table. So those are some of the things that we're starting to work on. I'd like to share, Betsy Einiger also sent me an email. She wanted to be here, as Jackie had said, so I'm just going to share her comments that she sent to me. I couldn't speak for her as eloquently, but she said, I was personally impacted by the training because of the reflection and soul searching that we were asked to do. The experience of introspection was powerful. It helped me to understand myself better. It was valuable to discuss the many reasons why children might feel different and how important it is for me to take the time to listen, check in with the students, and notice things that are less obvious. When I went back to my classroom after the training, my awareness to what we already do in the areas of promoting the richness of diversity and making sure that we have a safe learning environment for everybody's feelings was heightened. From our second grade Splash program to the many books we read and the discussions we have. It made me think that yes, this is a very important part of our time teaching children and learning for them. I feel so fortunate to have met and learned from Brenda and Franklin. They created an inspiring, thought-provoking, and enjoyable learning experience. So I thought she stated it beautifully, and I know also with some of the teachers we've talked about books, that we often bring books and we talk about them, but it really is about sitting down, identifying those books ahead of time, what do they have to offer, and bringing the richness of that into our curriculum.
Hi, I'm Alka Kamener, and I'm a parent here. This is my second year in the district. My oldest started in second grade. Quick little background, I am a first generation in this country. I was born in India, and I went to New York City schools, and then my parents moved when I was about 10 or 11 to Westchester schools. So I grew up in Westchester. And when we had kids, we decided to move back to Westchester because we just felt this was a great place to raise children. Having said that, being a minority, or as I grew up in this country, in Westchester, feeling like a minority, I was very aware and sensitive, or so I thought,
to what I felt as a parent to my children and really concerned about raising them here and having a diversity as an issue. I have found that after having this cultural proficiency seminar that yes, in some ways I am sensitive to it, but in other ways I wasn't, because when my kids would make comments, not negative comments, but just awarenesses about somebody's differences, not just, you know, race or religion, but also disabilities or special needs, I would tend to not necessarily approach the subject. It would be more like, oh, you know, they're just different, and we would change the subject. And I have found that I am so much more now, you know, reading up on this, so that if a child, my friend child does bring this issue, I will say, you know what, this is what their issues are. It could be this or this or this, and they have a variety of things, and they are more open to it, and they talk more about it with me. And that, to me, is going to make more of a difference than me just saying, oh, well, they're just different. So for that reason, I appreciate the fact that it's not just race or religion, but also so many other different things that make us all different, which I was not so aware of. Also, being from India, my culture is very important to me, and I'm married to an American, Jewish American, and my children moving into the public school system were very nervous because they were concerned that, you know, we're different. We're not Jewish. We're not, you know, Catholic. We're mixed. So I decided in second grade that I was going to go in and give a little seminar, 25, 30 minutes on India. And I spoke to the teacher and asked her about her curriculum to make sure that it wasn't going to be off base. And if she discussed, you know, landforms or planes, I was going to talk about it in the aspect of my discussion on India, and also about the Indian New Year. I had another parent who also is mixed, you know, half Indian, half American, and we sat there, we discussed it, we bought a couple of, you know, photographs. These children were as if I was giving them candy or giving them like toys or something, you know, the new Wii. It was just unreal. Their eyes were so wide open, and they were like, wow, Alexander, you're from India. How great, you are so lucky. And that just went, you know, home with these kids. I had parents call me, thank you so much for making my child just so much more aware of something a culture so different. Now in third grade, I have now 4 classrooms that I ended up talking to. And you know, it's amazing because I've already had the class for 7 classrooms now for next year. And so now I'm thinking, okay, now I need to get like Brenda and, you know, really come in, really give me a whole year. But it's amazing to me because I have parents asking me, not only just, you know, the teachers, and I have children who were in the class last year, who meet me in the hallway when they see me dressed up in my outfit. Oh my God, it was the Indian New Year, how was it? Oh, I'll light the candle tonight, I promise. You know, it was just amazing how much they retain from 30 minutes. So I realized that I, as one person, can make a difference. And to me, that was amazing. Yeah.
What have you done for us lately?
Actually, 2 projects I've been involved in. One is having workshops at the high school for high school students who we feel are ready to deal with cultural proficiency as an issue of their own growth. And secondly, Evan and I conducted a half-day workshop for the faculty. This was fun, a combined high school, middle school, half-day workshop on cultural proficiency on the last superintendent's conference day. Partly presentation on what it's all about, and partly a couple of experiential activities. That went real well. I guess what I want to say is I think this is very hard work. That's been my experience with it. Very important, but very hard. And not hard because we have a lot of overtly prejudiced people who we have to fight with over this issue. In fact, overtly prejudiced people are easy to deal with on this because they become very uncomfortable right away. It's hard because most people in Byram Hills, in my experience, are not overtly prejudiced. They're good people, they're caring, they're sensitive, They're appreciative of others, and they're generous. And the reason it's difficult to work with them is this is not about appreciating others or being sensitive to others or liking others. This is about developing personal skills, and the key word there is skills, for dealing with people who are different than you. It's really about improving your communication skills. Give you a great example, I think. What I said to the teachers was, if a student in your class says something insensitive about another group, you can tell them they're bad, in which case you're not working on cultural proficiency, or you can give them the skills on this continuum to move up to the next level. If you're focused on helping a student who says something insensitive get to the next level, versus telling them, I don't ever want to hear something like that again, I think it's disgusting, it's only when you're helping them to the next level that you're actually working on their skills. Just those couple of concepts are why I think this is very difficult. To borrow from you and to apply it to myself, I can love Indian food. That doesn't actually make me more culturally proficient. I've been to India and I love it. That doesn't make me more culturally proficient. I've collected Indian art. That doesn't make me more culturally proficient. What makes me more culturally proficient is when I can deal with someone of a different culture in a way that helps me to appreciate them for who they really are, helps them to feel comfortable that they're welcome, and I think most importantly, that in our schools, they are full participants who have an equal voice with everybody else. That's what I think cultural proficiency is about, and that's why I think it's very hard. I also think that's why it's worth doing, because we're about teaching skills. That's what schools are for, first of all. And secondly, because particularly I work with adolescents, at the high school level. In some way, this touches every high school kid, regardless of what their background is. Because every adolescent is dealing with ego development, and for every adolescent, it's important to find how their voice in a mature way belongs in our community. And in that sense, cultural proficiency is for every single kid in our school district. So thanks for doing this. It's been great.
Well, I think you can hear and see why I'm so proud of this work, why it is a life journey, and why we're very eager and will continue. So we open it up for board questions.
Any questions? Yeah.
Can you just review for us what specifically we did this year? Like, I know last year we had whatever we had last year, but
This year we had another 2 days with all administrators. We had 2 groups. We had a group of parents and teachers from last year who came back for additional days training. We started a new parent-teacher group, which is about 25 to 30 parents. And then we had 2 sessions, each with about 30 to 40 students.
and how about for next year?
For next year, the plan is pretty much the same, although we need to do more of building our capacity, as Marlena and Ken did at Wampus. We need, because, as Bill said, the skills are so difficult, the self-reflection is what's required. It takes time to think about how you're going to say your words. So we need to build our capacity. Alka and Ann Tedesco, who couldn't join us tonight, we need to consider how to bring more parents in, because this is work that the schools cannot do alone.
Right.
And that's one of the great advantages to this work, because I think, we love when there's really sincere partnerships with parents.
So this work clearly goes beyond the walls of
Yes.
Byram Hills. And I must tell you, when I thought of cultural proficiency, to me it's a natural hookup with history, it's a natural hookup with literature, but frankly, your comments about music and the fine arts, it's equally as natural, but I was so wrapped up with the R&Rs, as it were. To me, I think for kids that must be a terrifically enriching experience for them to see through music and art how cultural proficiency plays in, especially for the younger children. To really see that it's a whole world there, and there's no better or best. This is just how the world coexists with each other through music. I think that's thrilling. How do the kids handle it?
They love it. Many of the folk songs, since I teach third grade general music, many of the folk songs are multicultural. The kids sing folk songs, learn about folk songs from Africa, Black American, Asian songs, from Korea, Appalachian Mountains. And so when we sing songs from Korea, and you see the kids who are from Korea, their smile. I mean, they just light up, and they look at each other, because then they have 2 or 3 in the same class, and they know, they link up. And the other kids see, and they start smiling. And so there's a pride that they start to feel, and the other kids who are not part of that group start to pick up on that.
You don't see, I guess, the question I would ask you, to me, one of the challenges in teaching this is not to make it exclusionary. And how do you do that? How do you make sure that what you're teaching, while to me it would seem like by definition it's inclusionary, I could see how people might consider it to be exclusionary. How we're going to focus on, this culture, that culture. What are all the other cultures? Why aren't you choosing this culture? And what makes that culture so special that we're going to spend time on that? And let's say we don't have any Serbo-Croatians, in Byron Mills. Maybe we do, but let's assume we don't. Well, how come we're not spending time seeing what goes on, in those countries? Why are we choosing what we're doing? How do you address issues like that?
High school is a little bit easier because kids can generalize, I think, more easily. And I'm not an expert at the lower grades, but I think high school kids, and the main place that we do it, you mentioned social studies, is it really fits in well with our facing history curriculum. Those kids can generalize. They can see that, if we study the one genocide, unfortunately we can apply it to another. At the lower grades, I'm not an expert.
In my class, I'm sorry. In my classes, what I try and do, it's not always about the specific culture. What I'm trying to convey to them is about just the experience of any differences, any culture, anything. And so it's at 5th grade level, so they're young. And so, if, for example, an encore period, kids are in various parts of the building, and there's special services that happen, there's lessons, there's a lot of things happen. And kids start to realize in 5th grade, well, so-and-so's missing. Well, why are they? Where are they going? And it's just a difference with kids. And rather than, we'll have a lot of discussions about, differences in that capacity, and then I'll do an activity such as processionals around the world, and it's only 5 or 6 processionals, and I'm teaching the kids about those specific cultures, but then going back about their own cultures. And actually, each year I start the year doing the same activity, and every year I just jump into it. And I hit play, and there's tons of giggles. I have to stop. This year, because I had taken this, I rethought my whole lesson, and I started with this really deep conversation. The kids are like, Mrs. Roberts, this isn't music. I'm like, you're right, this is life. And then we had this whole discussion, and it was amazing. And you could have dropped a pin, and the activity was actually very hard for 5th graders. They then had to take a picture and listen to music, and then turn into that culture and make a processional. And it was the first time in my whole year of career as a teacher, 9 years here, that they took it completely seriously, boys and girls, and they actually, in their own interpretation, created that culture. And I think it was because I then, I presented it a little bit better, a little bit differently this year.
Marlene and Ken and you, Bill, spoke about those who are taught becoming the teachers. And one of my questions is, because in thinking about it, that's the natural progression as something becomes part of a system, that those who have been taught become the next group of teachers. My question to you or to anybody else, how well prepared at this point do you feel to be the teachers of the cultural proficiency program? It's not really, that's probably not the proper word for it, but to carry forward the message and teach it.
To be honest, I felt pretty prepared because Brenda and Franklin really gave us such sure, sound footing, material, resources. And that's only half of the battle. The other half is the desire to want to learn, to want to implement, to want to bring about change. And so for me, I just inhaled on my own. And so when we decided to do the workshop within our school, I felt pretty confident. Not that I had all the answers, but I felt pretty prepared to be able to conduct on a base level, a introductory point to bring change to our building office.
And it was also great because we never claimed to be experts, and that was our first session, saying that we are not gurus here. We took a training class, and then we're just giving the same information that we received, and that was a really cool idea because then they could now take the resources home, look at be so trained in order to be the teacher in this dialogue because it was without our wanted to talk, and we had a roundtable discussion. It was the first time many of them had even talked about this, and it was really uncomfortable and it was really hard at first. And the first session we kind of sat there, and we were breaking through because they were scared. So I don't really know if it matters. I think that any one of us could just open a dialogue.
Jackie, I'd like to ask you a question, and anyone from the circle, of course, can answer. But what year is this now we're doing this in the school?
We've just finished our third year.
Okay, so, and the youngest grade this was brought into was what?
Well, it's interesting. We've only had Brenda and Franklin with high school kids, but because of the teacher's impact, the concepts of cultural proficiency are now at home.
Because my question is,
and at Crittenden.
what are we, how are we making plans to really make this a continuum of education and for kids who are going through the school system to where 5th graders, 8th graders, 9th graders, they're maturing, they're ostensibly, getting smarter and being able to think more, and we can be able to prepare a cultural diversity curriculum or methodology that is up to this.
I think that's one of our challenges, and that's why I say this is really a life work. Whether it's always a board goal, I'm not sure it always has to be a board goal. I do think it needs to be a serious focus for a few years, but I think we have evidence that it is part of our teachers and administrators' thinking, and it is becoming part of our Byram Hills culture, that recognizing that differences, and the biggest thing is not being afraid to say, Ken and I have talked so often, afraid to talk about color, afraid to talk, Alka and I spoke, afraid to show that I don't really understand everything about the Indian culture. I don't have to be an expert, but I have to take a risk to show my vulnerability as a human being and acknowledge I care about you and I want to learn who you are. So I think that's life going. I think we can do that. It does take a synergy of very devoted teachers, administrators, and parents. But I feel like I don't feel we're on sand like the first year. I wasn't really sure where we were going. I feel like we're building a foundation.
Can I say, I think it is really important that we continue to take the deliberate steps, to make the deliberate efforts that we are in our classrooms, such as the things that you're talking about, such as the things that I know go on in foreign language classrooms, with music, with art, with literature, with just dialoguing in the language about different cultures, comparing people from our culture to people in other cultures, foreign cultures. But I also think, again, as a leader, one of the leaders in the district, the way it has served me was to make me more reflective. And I love the fact that parents are being trained in the cultural proficiency, and students, because I think in any leadership position, be it an administrator to their department member, or superintendent to their administrators, or even a teacher to their students, or parents to their children, they're all different types of leadership positions that I think for me it really is, it's just ongoing. How fair and consistent can I be with everyone in my department or with everyone in my classroom? I mean, I certainly have closer relationships with some people in my department than I do with outside of work. But there is no way that I'm going to treat the people that I'm closer with differently from anybody else in my department. If I offer something to Kim, I'm going to offer it to you too. If I take something away, I'm going to take something, and that's the way it is. And just recognizing the differences and celebrating them, and treating everybody fairly and consistently, and bringing out the positive in everybody, because I think that's what's really important in any kind of a team, or as a leader. I think that that's important for me to recognize, the positive in my department members, in my students, and find that and celebrate it, bring it out somehow.
Sir, I saw your hand. Just identify yourself, please.
Alvin Burke, I have 2 children in the district. I would just ask, how committed is the district to continue and develop the effort?
I believe we're very committed. You know, we're 3 years. This is an expensive initiative. It's not without cost. It's a very expensive initiative. But I'm confident, and I can't speak for the board, but I'm very confident as the next superintendent, and I'm humbled to say that, but I am very confident that we are very committed to this work because we've been reinforced by each other, by parents, and by our students that respect is at the core of our work in teaching. And, you know, I think when we look around our world, we're so motivated. How are we all going to get along in this world? And I think that motivates us tremendously. So I can say, and I don't mean to speak only for myself, because I know I can speak for the BHTA, our teachers union, our BHAA. We need to get more CSEA trained. I know I can speak for the PTSA. We're very committed, and I believe the board took a very, very substantial step 3 years ago in making this a district goal, because there are so many competing goals for board members' attention.
I believe it makes for a stronger district. I mean, now and eventually, I think it just it embeds.
We agree with you. Absolutely. I have Brett and
I want to thank the administration for inviting me to participate in these. I had the opportunity to go 2 days last year and 2 days this year, and I didn't really know what I was getting into, and I came away with a very different and improved, I think, benefit from that. Now, that's personally. Philosophically, as a district, we have to ask, is this worth the candle? And I don't think we can, let me say it this way, this is one, I think, essential to get from good to great as a district, to borrow a phrase you like to borrow.
Right, it is a borrowed phrase. I wish it was mine, but it's not. It is a borrowed phrase.
We will be and could be a good district if we didn't do this, and we could get our kids out in the world and they would do just fine. But to have this skill, which Bill's really right, it's a developed skill, will enable kids to really become great human beings if they take advantage of it, and our faculty to impress that on the kids. So I don't think you can have a value as a district to prepare kids for the 21st century if you don't take some effort in this regard. Unfortunately, there is no sort of curriculum you can buy and give it to the teachers and say, we got that done. And it is kind of like pushing a rock uphill. You got to keep working at it to keep continuously improving, especially because the kids move through the district, and so much of this has to be an education that ties in the parents at home. Let me also say that that risk that you took to put the parents and the faculty together, it paid enormous, I think it does pay enormous benefits, not only for me, but for the other parents that were there. We shared a view that we had insights for the first time of some of the character of our teachers. And I'm not talking about their ability to teach and the problems that come up day to day in the class and dealing with parents, but we got to understand what underlies some of the faculty members that we work with. And you can't help but walk away with enormous confidence that these are people of great character and integrity, and you are just thrilled to let your kids go to school and be raised by somebody who may know the the math or the sciences a little bit better, but shares your worldview for preparing the kids for the next years. So I'm behind this 100%. I share with you the concerns about what do we do, how do we keep this moving forward. at least for the short term, we've got to continue where we are.
Absolutely.
It's really got to trickle down into train the trainers so that we can spread it out. If you do spread it with sort of a management structure, you may not have the same kind of impact that you get when you get a Franklin in here running.
We'll never be
Brenda.
Brenda and Franklin.
No.
They're extraordinary
But
human beings.
You can still have an enormous difference by getting people from an incapacity to a blindness,
Right.
or a blindness to a precompetence, or the hardest from the cultural competence to cultural proficiency. You can have some effort or some benefit at the edges, which is still worth it. But I think that we got to keep down the path that we're headed.
I'm going to call on Eva, and we're going to look to wrap this discussion up.
I was also fortunate in having been able to attend the half-day workshop, and I know that one of the things that the Campbell Joneses made very clear in that workshop was how much they looked really sort of, globally is the wrong word, I mean it has other connotations, but at the realm of different types of prejudices and proficiency that was needed. And I know very high on their list as well were things like gender proficiency. So that one of the things I hear as I hear the talk come around the circle is a lot about some of the aspects of what the Campbell Joneses addressed, with ethnicity and race and things which we know we have a lot of problems with being culturally proficient about. But I hear less discussion about those other things. And I'm also thinking, as I think about it, that, for instance, if you want to talk about different religions, it seems in some ways easier because religions have a system. You can talk about the system, you can talk about the traditions, you can talk about a lot of different things about them. When you get to something like gender, it becomes much more difficult. What is the system of a gender? And the minute you start to talk about systems of a gender, you're back into stereotypes again. I mean, it's sort of a vicious circle. So it seemed, in a sense, a much more amorphous area, but I know it was something which was very high on the Campbell Joneses list to address. And part of my thinking is that we've got this sort of, in a sense, a one go-round of a big push to really make a difference in our district. And as Bill said, people sometimes don't generalize very well. You can't necessarily say that if you get the point on race or ethnicity that you will also get it on gender, or you will also get it on disabilities, or you also get it on these other dimensions. So in a sense, I'm not really sure I'm even asking a question as much as saying that I think we really have to keep focused on all those areas and somehow find a way to address those as well, because I know in part one of the reasons that the board sought this goal was really to address all those areas, and we shouldn't lose focus on the whole as we're doing so. So I don't know if anybody wants to speak to it or not, but
I'll let Tim, because he hasn't spoken yet. No, go ahead.
Just simply, I want to say that, again, that this is, I look at this framework, it's a lens by which to view everything we do in the district, and that's a message that I got from Brenda and Franklin, is that everything from the policies to the activities we do in the school to the interactions we have with each other, this is the framework to use to view those things. And so I think by building this framework and getting it internalized in the way we interact, everything we do becomes part of this conversation, whether it's race, gender, or anything, whether it's eye color with the little kids and you just look different. And talking about this scale, and that's the skills we're trying to develop in students, is everything we do is viewed through this framework.
I think part of what I'm saying is how important it is to make sure that people look. I'm thinking of an instance, as an example, when my daughters came home when they were in elementary school. And they were talking about gym class, and I said, you know, it was a mixed gym class, and I said, you know, it's fine, but we stand there because the boys only pass the ball to the boys. And I said, did anybody notice? And that's the kind of thing that it's so easy to be in a room and not notice. That you have to actively look as opposed to just see.
What you shared too about, I think we have to provide those opportunities when we open the dialogue and we talk about, you know, not generalizing or helping the children to carry it over. But, you know, when you have that conversation with your daughter, you know, to come into school and to be able to have that conversation with other students and say, this is how I felt. I think when we share, you know, when we support the attitude of stepping into someone else's shoes, I think it's so difficult for children. I think it's extremely difficult for adults. But when we, you know, create the atmosphere where we can share our stories and our experiences, you know, and then we provide those opportunities for people to step into someone else's shoes. Sometimes I think we shut that dialogue down, and, you know, opening up, how does that, you know, how does that make you feel? I'll just share an experience. This has been ongoing work for me. It's been part of my master's program that I took earlier. I remember when I was in a classroom full of adults, so many different backgrounds, and they would share experiences and perspectives that, like, I just couldn't put myself in because I hadn't heard it from them, or I don't know if I'm wording this the right way, but the way they share their thoughts and feelings, it just opened my eyes and my heart, you know, and it was kind of in an environment that was set up, and at the same time it was like we said, they're difficult conversations to do, but, you know, I think what we're doing is great work because we are opening that environment to have those conversations that we need to have.
We have to, believe it or not, do wrap this up shortly, but Gail and John, and then we'll have a code on this.
You know, I think we talked about this last year too, because it is an issue. And I had a similar but very different thought last year when I entered the 2-day workshop with Ken was there also. And I walked in and I saw Franklin and Brenda, and I went, okay, this is going to be so limited because it's going to be just black people, you know, like we're going to have black and white, and there's so many more differences. And after the end of 2 days, I was like, it's so not that. And every participant got it, that they're just gifted people that happen to be black, and we're just sharing their experience to help other people to be more culturally proficient. But it was so about everybody in that room had something that brought them to tears, that they had had a bias against them or against their children that they shared with the rest of us, and that's why we all walked away hugging. But it, unfortunately, even this is what we talked about last year, it took 2 days. And that's the trick, is where does the district get enough money and enough time and enough of our parents to take 2 days out of their schedules, our teachers to take 2 days? Where do we get that time? And I listen to what you two are doing, and I go, this is unbelievable, because that's the only answer that I can see, and not that I have all the answers, but is having somebody that takes the risk to say, I might not have the message perfect, but I'm going to start the ball rolling. And that's what I'm seeing here, is people that said, like, I can make a difference, and I'm going to start it, and I'm going to maybe not be as good as them, but maybe someday I will be, but at least we'll get going. And I know exactly what you're saying, but it is the answer. I mean, it definitely, the message is everybody has a problem. So you might think that your disability, no, but it is. You might think your disability is the worst thing, but I could top it. And that was really what it was like. I know exactly how I feel, because I felt the same way when I was a kid, because, you know, I couldn't run, or I never got picked for the team, or everybody had something. So it was great. And so I shared your concerns that it was too limited. I was completely convinced. This year I was working, and I was so sad not to get to continue it, but I think it's great, and I think what everybody has, you know, walked away, the teachers that were able to, and even the parents that were able to have an impact, it's exciting, and that's how it's going to kind of weave into our schools. I'm hoping that we just, you know, get the enthusiasm, more people involved.
And I guess what I want to say is, maybe this is, I don't overwhelm myself with how are we going to do it all, because to me it really is a life's work. If we can keep moving forward and make small steps every year, we are doing something important. The whole world hasn't figured out how people of race, color, gender are going to get along and live together. There is no community where it works well. But we can improve who we are and where we are in Byram Hills.
John.
Going through this continuing to the goal of cultural proficiency, what I always had a concern with is that we don't get stuck somewhere in the middle there in cultural blindness. And I'll give you an example. At Crittenden, there's a program, and I don't know if they're still doing it, but to send books and other items to Jamaica for the students in Jamaica, which is great. And however, what is the message that it's sending to the students? That they're sending books to Jamaica, it's underprivileged, but what goes on from there? What do they see and what comes out of this as looking at Jamaicans? I think going another step further would be, okay, now that these students have learned something about the culture of Jamaica, what can we bring to the school that would show them that now Jamaicans here in America are doing the same things that their parents are doing? We have, you know, Jamaicans that are investment bankers, doctors, lawyers, and so that's the problem that, you know, or concern that I have, that, you know, we don't put on these blinders and just stop there by saying, okay, we're looking at a culture and a community, but don't look further. What may sending these books over there, what could come out from that? So, you know, I would just like to see, you know, the expanse in something like that program.
John, I just want to say, and Kim could speak to this, I wish Evan were here too, the power, we have recognized that. We've learned that and this is taking a risk to be reflective, and sometimes in our desire to help, we may have been demeaning other cultures. We looked a lot at our partnership with Mount Vernon. Evan spent a lot of time looking at our partnership with Mount Vernon, and that changed significantly. But it does take awareness, and I think we are better at, it's very easy for people with resources to say, I will give you resources, but the implication is I have the power. One of the words that Brenda and Franklin have tried to make part of our language is that, are we empowering somebody or are we forever marginalizing them? And those are the kind of conversations that has changed several things that we do. I just can think of the power of one day has changed so totally in celebrating who people are, and I can't remember the other program that you've done through Facing History.
There's been, the 6th grade really has taken a hold of it, then the 7th grade is now pulled in, but I mean, the bottom line isn't, we're trying to, it's not what can we do for you, but what do we do for each other, you know, as far as a community and different cultures, and that's something that we're really trying to promote and develop an understanding about.
Well, all I know is that a year ago we spoke about this. I walked out saying, I got to find the 2 days. And we hope we got to find the 2 days. And your job, Jackie, is to how are we going to make this work, because there's nothing but good things to be said about this. And it is obviously worked, as I said before, goes beyond the walls of Byram Hills. But as Bill and the other administrators have said, this is very important stuff, and we probably could talk about this for the next 2 hours, but we can't. So
they have to teach tomorrow.
So some of them have to teach, and some of other things to do. So I want to thank every one of you to stay this late, and we really do value your comments so much on this, and we look forward to our ongoing work in this. Thank you all very much. We're going to take a short break, members of the board, short, and then we're going to pick up with the Tri-State Social Studies report. I asked the board's consent to a new business to skip to 8.4 so we can move Mr. Thompson along. This is the acceptance of the annual visual inspection report on facilities. May I have a motion, please, to accept the annual visual inspection report on facilities?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion or questions? Steve, anything you care to comment on the report?
Yeah, just very quickly, just a quick overview. The AVI report is it's an SED requirement.
It's updated every year, and basically it's just a report card on our school facilities, buildings and grounds, satisfactory condition, if there's anything unsatisfactory. It's also how we wind up coming up with our 5-year cap plan, and a lot of the items also were done in the bond issues that we have done over the last 8 years. So basically that's just it.
It's in the packet. Anyone have any questions or comments?
If anyone would like to see the report, Steve has this in his office. That's the report on the table there.
Right.
But there's a lot of good information in this particular report.
Great.
The only question I have is I'm going to hope that we're not committing to these specific projects by putting them in this plan. Are we? I mean, if things change, what happens?
Things change year to year
Yeah.
with this and also with our 5-year cap plan.
Right.
A lot of the items are also done out of our operating budget also. A lot of the different recommendations.
Well, all of these are out of the operating budget.
I'm saying a lot of them, but some of them are in the cap plan, and then some are done just with the yearly, maintenance line.
But this is not a commitment for the board to expend funds.
No, it's just the acceptance of the report.
Right.
And every year it gets updated too. So Steve will be coming back each year with that.
You say, I can't recall if I've ever seen this in all my years in
Well,
school
this is the
board.
first time we're actually bringing it to the board.
Oh, okay.
It's the first time we're bringing it to the board, but this has been done for the last, probably since 2000.
Enemy. Okay, any further questions or comments? All in favor, please? Thank you.
Thank you for doing this, Steve.
Brings us to, thank you, Steve. 8.2, it is time for the Tri-State Social Studies Report. We have, I see our Social Studies Chair,
Just press this.
Kim Lappel. Yes.
Kim and Bill, would you mind taking those two chairs at the corner of the table, just so the board can see you and the camera can see you? You might have to move down a little bit from the slides, but that will give everybody equal opportunity.
Right. Okay.
You can raise it right down. Just on this.
Sorry, got a little nervous there. Where was the report? Okay,
Dr. Terrell, you want to lead off?
yeah. I'm sorry for the lateness of the hour, because this is a major report. I'll try and go efficiently through it. Background Tri-State is an organization that we belong to. You must be a member. You must be accepted into Tri-States. By virtue of your membership, you are deemed to be, having filled their criteria, to be a high-performing school district. Tri-States is different than other evaluations that they make an assumption that you are already a very good and fine school district. So they're looking to help you systematically improve through a framework that's been developed over several years. The purpose of the evaluation, which is pretty complex, is to go through 15 indicators. And the 15 indicators look at student performance and then structures. And they group them into internal, what they call support, and external supports. The process of evaluation for Tri-States involved 3 days of an evaluation team that came to the district. They interviewed teachers, parents, and students. They reviewed evidence that's prepared by the Social Studies Department over a year-long process. You must prepare evidence for each of the 15 indicators. And then they review surveys by parents, teachers, and students. That's basically the framework that they look at. What I'm going to do is go through the highlights. The board has the full report. We tried to pull out the highlights of the report through our lens. Commendations. Again, I want to make a point. A commendation from Tri-State is something that they think sets you apart from other high-performing districts. So in the area of performance assessment, which we were very interested in, and I'll get to that when we look at the temperature map, and I've talked to the board about some of the things we need to do in the future. We were happy to see that they recognized not our performance assessments, but in fact they were focused on critical thinking. They also acknowledged the writing revisions that we've made in the Social Studies Department 8 to 9. Their recommendations had to do, although they put it under performance assessment, had to do with developing a shared definition of differentiation and then using examples from our 6 to 12 work. They also recommended a common criteria 6 to 12 for our performance assessments. And I think you heard that in our performance assessment review. That's something we haven't accomplished yet, but need to do, and we recognize that. In terms of data, they're very, very focused on data. Now, that was a problem for us in this review. Data for Tri-States really means student results data. And that comes in the Tri-States world through either standardized testing data or a system of performance assessments. We didn't necessarily have the standardized testing data that they were looking for because we no longer give the Terra Novus. So they typically look for 3 to 5 years worth of data that shows student progress. Although they did acknowledge that the data we do have, we use well to make modifications in. Their recommendations came in this area something we expected. They're recommending to us that if we are not going to have a standardized testing program, that we have to find different ways to develop longitudinal data. And that really goes to what we're speaking about, which is a system of performance assessments where we can follow students' work over many years. Again, this goes to their commendations on the data we did have that we did present, where they recognized significant improvements over time. And just as an example, when you look at the thematic essays in the 10th grade, 2.8 to 3.0 doesn't seem like a huge increase, but for a district that's already very strong, it actually is. In the area of metacognition, this is something we've worked on quite a bit through work with Nancy Letts and other consultants. And it really has to do with helping kids think about their thinking. And they saw our work in metacognition as very important and significant work. And it really has to do with empowering students to know what they're good at, what they're not so great at, be able to articulate that, and then have kids set goals to improve in their work. Again, their recommendations, we saw a theme in their recommendations. Again, they're asking us to develop a system where if we're going to do what we say we do in metacognition and performance assessment, we need a system to track student progress over time. Again, they go back to the 612 writing rubric, which they were very impressed with, and they made many comments about that, both in their commentary to us, that was something that was very significant in the work of the Social Studies Department. Guidance, again, they had many commendations. Doesn't, I think, surprise us that they were very impressed with the high school graduate survey data that's done. We were able to show multiple years of survey data with students. And the work in Mentor of the Getting to Know You surveys that are now part of the Mentor program. You'll recall in the math Tri-State evaluation, we get many calls from Tri-State. We talked about it tonight. Our evaluation system from an educational point of view is one of the most rigorous evaluation systems that Tri-States observes, and they again acknowledge that in the commendations. Professional development came as no surprise to us, that they recognized the extensive array of professional development that the district offers in many forms and in many ways. Their recommendation is something that's really hard for us to accomplish, but we're going to challenge ourselves on this, which is, can we show more specifically through student work that the professional development we do improves student performance? It's a hard link to make. We really go back to that system of performance assessment where we have to find those linkages to be able to fulfill this recommendation. District culture, here's where they really, and I have to, give special praise and consideration to Kim. They recognized in talking to the department and to students and to parents that Kim's role in developing a culture and Bill's role and Evan's role in developing a culture of continuous improvement within social studies is very ingrained in the department now. And 3 cheers to you for that, Kim. In the curriculum and instruction, they talked about the various instructional methodologies that we've used over the years. I think the board knows Socratic Seminar has been a very big part of our work with inquiry, with reflection, with metacognition, questioning techniques, inquiry. It's been a very big focus of ours for several years, as well as our work in Dimensions of Learning, which is an instructional strategies program that we've used to help teachers with differentiation over several years. The recommendations in curriculum and instruction are difficult recommendations for us to implement, but we are going to work on all of these over the next several years. They really have to do with developing that system that we've been talking about of performance assessments with benchmarks, with rubrics that are clear, 6-12, focus, what are the criteria for every performance assessment. You saw in our work on performance assessment that we've begun to introduce the qualities of performance assessment through the work of Dr. Giselle Martin-Kniep. That work is fairly new. We didn't have evidence over 3 or 4 years of using that as a criteria for high-quality performance assessment. That will very much be the focus of our work going forward. Those qualities that we've agreed that now we are working with Giselle. She's helping us identify how do we see evidence of those qualities in our performance assessments and rubrics. These recommendations go to the same kinds of recommendations. In differentiation, they really were pushing us to have a more refined approach that was a shared vision that even students recognized. And that's a challenge, but it's a good recommendation, we thought. Support for student needs. They recognized, and I think everybody in the district is well aware of all the athletic, extracurricular, the social studies department is involved in many programs beyond the classroom. And of course, what we know why that's so important is that it's that connection with the student. It's a way to have students connect with teachers so they bring their relationship, and it goes along with our cultural proficiency work, where we get to know each other, and through learning about each other, we know where someone's potential and interest and readiness falls. Of course, they were very impressed with the work of our site-based teams, that we have a focus that's been ongoing for several years, and the work of the PTSA in supporting the district. Parent surveys were something that we were really pleased about. Of course, when you do a survey, you're always worried. I can't say we weren't. They found the parent survey results among the highest that they've seen in a school district. So we were very pleased about that. We've talked about the kind of projects that our kids do. We talked, they began to identify some of those. And while the work that this really is, I think, credit to the board, or the variety of communications that the district has that helps involve parents in the school district. They took particular note of the e-boards in social studies. Social studies, is so far our only department that has an extensive e-board system where parents can log on and see all sorts of assignments coming up for their kids, and there's a very big communication of email between the social studies teachers and parents. So although our district maps are good, the e-boards really enhance them. Again, this is a very challenging recommendation, but one we'll think about. I'm not quite sure we have to think about this one. They want to see that all our communication focuses on student performance. I don't have an easy answer how we would fulfill that recommendation, but that's one of the recommendations they made to us. 3 cheers to the board. They saw that they interviewed all of us individually, that there's a very collaborative relationship that the administrators and teachers and parents talk about in relationship to the Board of Education, that the whole district sees itself working very well together. And I think that's just 3 cheers for the board and for our administrative team and our teachers and our parent groups. They acknowledge the work of the foundation and that they've supported our budget through many innovative programs. The temperature map. The temperature map is an attempt by they give you your highlights, your recommendations, your commendations. Then they try and help you see, again, where you have systematic strengths and where you have areas for improvement. The temperature map is very difficult because they're looking at links. They have the approach, which is they determine to be the district philosophy. They ask lots of questions of staff. Can you articulate the district philosophy? Do you know what the shared vision is? Do you know what the district is thinking about methods of improvement? And we have to present that evidence for the 15 indicators. And then they ask you in your implementations, they look at, they're not really interested in individual teacher work. They're looking for a system within the department. So in the implementation, they're looking, is there a systematic way that all of the department is feeding into the implementation? The results, which was the hardest for us, which we were not able to produce the kind of evidence that we were looking for. It's evidence over, I put 5, it's actually 3 to 5 years. But in that sense, they're looking for a system of student work over time, either through a standardized testing program or through a system of performance assessments, which we knew was going to be one of our weaknesses, which we don't have yet. So in the temperature map, you'll see the medium color is they saw many, let me go to the dark first. The dark represents a comprehensive process. Results were evident everywhere they looked. Medium means they saw many processes. Results were evident. Of course, they say to you going into it, you never can get to a dark box and everything. It's just are very, very good. We thought they really hit some very important areas that we need to continue to improve on. The temperature map is a little confusing. But the recommendations are not confusing to us, and they're actually very good. And I think they hit what we knew were the areas we need to improve on. So in that sense, we feel okay about the report.
You know, as far as the department's concerned, we benefited tremendously from this in 2 ways. The tangible way is that we have a report that gave us recommendations that allowed us to see where we, next steps. The intangibles are, if you think about the work that we've done as a department, we've spent time together. There's been at least 7 teachers that were trained in the social studies department in the Tri-States process. So you're then giving a teacher a different perspective, a broader perspective about all that goes into a department, a curriculum, a process. So that in itself is a value. Then they go visit other schools. They see some of the things that work at other schools. They come back. That's very valuable. Another intangible is our preparation. It did take a long time. It took a lot of work. That work had value to it. It led us to deeper appreciation of each other and what we do, a better understanding of what we do. But even within that, we self-assessed our department. And in the process of getting ready, we looked and said, you know what? Here's an area that we want to spend time developing. We almost identified it right then and there that we wanted to spend more time on it. We took a department meeting in the high school, a faculty meeting in the fall in the high school, and led a breakout groups about asking other departments how students think about their thinking and metacognition pieces. So we learned what other departments were doing. So within all this, you have the tangible of the report, but you also have the intangible of tremendous professional development and team cohesion and pride and reflection that was involved also.
And I want to follow up, please. I respect the fact that enormous value comes to the district in preparing for this, because we learn a lot about what we're doing and we get organized, like cleaning out your closet, you know. I did read the report. I went to the executive summary, found no executive summary, and after having this report that Jackie's just presented, this executive summary doesn't make any sense to me. They're asking questions about to what extent have you used technology and developed your program through technology as question number 3 on the executive summary. And I have to say, when I saw that it wasn't even paginated properly, and, you know, 3 lines, well, you know, I don't know. It's their report, and it came out as a draft. It just wasn't impressive to me as something that I, as a board member, could use. If you find great value out of it and out of the process, then, you know, cheers.
Well, find great value out of it, I'm not sure. The way I've made sense of it is, I think the point that Susie made, it has become true with Tri-States, that they're biting off more than they can chew when they come in. Consequently, some of what you get doesn't make sense to you. Some of the things we've already pointed out. To give you another idea, you know, they commended us for, under guidance, which they scored very high for this survey that we do with the 9th graders, that I have to tell you is a borderline inconsequential part of the guidance program. But somebody on the team caught on to it. They're here for 3 days. They're grabbing at things, perhaps. So I think, to a large extent, what I'm finding is it's very hard for them to tell the full story. What we found was, in the commendations, they tended to hit the nail on the head. They tended, in the recommendations rather, to hit the nail on the head. And that those are really things that are the next growth step for us. And I think the bottom line is, what we hope to get out of this was to get the whole department, which is many different people of different styles, focused on the same objectives in terms of our next step. And in that sense,
was that successful?
That part was successful, yes.
And are the recommendations things that open the eyes of some people?
Yeah.
Or are they just simply reaffirmations of things we already know?
I think by the time they finish the study,
I think change for individuals comes in different places and different times, and I think for some people, they came as no surprise. For others, there were some surprises, and we'll always be in that change process when we're trying to get everybody to the same level. But I agree with Bill. Nobody took it casually. Nobody read the report. We met with the whole department last week. Nobody took the report and said, oh, we're great. We don't have anything to do. They all took it to heart. And I commended them. They've been very serious about this. That they've really stood up as a department and said, we recognize that we have new journeys to continue. And I think that's a tribute to Kim and Bill and Evan, but to each of the members of the department also.
Just 2 questions. One is specific. Could somebody take a look at the results to question 19?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you that. That's a mistake.
Okay, it's a mistake. Fine. My second, I assume it's just reversed.
Exactly. That's on the teacher. And, you know, I apologize. After the packet went out on Friday, I meant to mention that in my board report.
Okay.
There was one mistake on the survey.
It broke the pattern of how...
That's right.
They acknowledged they did the questions. And we, just so you know, we asked every teacher to confirm their results.
The mistake was obvious.
Yeah. I just, and the second is, they make a lot of recommendations. Does Tri-States ever say, and I kind of would hope they do, take a look at the program that Bedford or Chappaqua or some other school district has in place as a model for what you might want to consider? Did they ever give you?
Yes. They don't actually say a whole program. What they'll say is, you know, if you're working on performance assessment, you may want to go visit Ridgefield, Connecticut.
Seen over all the praise as this one does for Kim Lappel as head of the Social Studies Department. And I think they got that right.
We do too. And they talked to a lot of kids and parents and teachers, and that came across too. So, I'm feeling very humbled that it was recognized throughout the district by lots of people. And that's great. If we're going to wrap up, I think if you could just summarize the next steps, because that's really, I think. I'll fast forward, but you just.
If you look at the last 2 pages of
Kim, you have
this.
to do some speaking now, otherwise,
Yeah. We realized you hadn't even talked yet.
I had a little bit. When we looked at what Tri-States was recommending to us, it aligned with the work that we're doing with performance assessments. And if you look at the department and what we're going to be doing with I feel like I need to stand up, with the performance assessments, these are our next steps. These are things that we're actually have underway and that this is like kind of the end line. We do need to establish a working definition, and we have, with the work with Jackie and Bill and Tim and Evan, we've spoken about what the definition is, what our understandings are, and the department has established that. We've begun looking at our core skills of social studies, what we value. It really has come down to critical thinking, and then if that's what we're really going to take a look at in our performance assessments, then we're going to look at Giselle Martin, her 8 characteristics in the performance assessments, and then also bring that in as we develop these performance assessments. A 6-12 rubric to assess these thinking skills. We have some models that we're looking at presently. This summer we're going to be taking a look at them. And we will have a rubric set up, or a scale is what it's going to either probably be called, a scale of thinking skills. We have to establish some common grade level performance assessments. Dependent on whether there's a state exam at the end of the grade or not will determine probably if there'll be 1 or 2 common grade level performances. In 9th grade there'll be one maybe in the fall and the spring that takes a look at student progress. In 10th maybe we'll limit it to 1, and then we'll look at the state test. And then the last piece is that this will all lead us to a culture of assessment and reflection for teachers and students. The vision is this: we'll have a systematic approach with our performance assessments that we can look at a student as they go through 6 through 12, all of those grades, look at how they've done on the scale, look at where their successes are, and be able to, teachers said, yes, this is what we want to do, but we actually want to take this data then and make sense of it, and then develop our curriculum and make changes and support our students. So if we're going to do this, it needs to be meaningful, and it needs to make sense, and it needs to give us data to support our teaching and to support our students, which is one and the same. And this goes right along with the common assessments, the benchmarks, the exemplars, the systematic approach, using the data. So that, a big piece of all of this goes right along with the performance assessments work we're doing. There are also other suggestions that they made in amongst the report. We're going to continue to talk about our writing program. It's ongoing. Next year, we already have, in addition to the performance assessments, we're going to sit down and talk about student writing, thesis writing, talk about some areas of challenges. We're going to share exemplars, so that's in place. It addresses those very same things that Tri-States was asking us to do. In technology, Tri-States spoke about a global approach and using technology for students to make meaning of the world. Well, we are blogging. Our middle school students are very involved with blogging. High school is as well. This is going to be something that, again, a systematic approach, showing multiple perspectives, maybe bringing facing history into this, looking at schools that are maybe in different areas of the country, different socioeconomic, maybe in different countries, where we can share these multiple perspectives. We always will be working on the smartboard and EduOnes, and there is a potential that we're going to look into future video conferencing. Facing history, what we're going to be doing this summer is looking at the impact our program has on our students. That's something that when they ask, okay, you're doing great stuff, great initiatives, but how do you know it's working? How do you know what's working, what you need to refine? So this summer, we're going to kind of take a look at how can you tell in the classroom as a program the impact we're having on our students. I think Peter Nelson's going to be bringing in someone from Boston to help us. And then the research program, we're going to be looking at using the Bob catalog, forever trying to bring National History Day, which would truly bring another depth of the research program to the research program, and then again establishing benchmarks. The last piece actually we've really talked about, which we had asked some questions, and it goes right back to what they suggested in their recommendations in these questions, which is in the report. It basically goes back to the things that I just mentioned, the technology, the performance assessments, and facing history. A lot of those pieces will all be addressed through our work in the future. So that's the plan, and we think it aligns. It doesn't bring us to a halt, it actually keeps us moving.
I noticed a suggestion in one of the last slides, the National History Day. We obviously at the beginning of this meeting had the reception for the Intel students and noted that one of them was quoted very recently in the Journal News in an article saying it was a life-changing experience. And you know, one of the things I've been very interested in over the years is asking the question about whether we can broaden that to the students who are interested in humanities, to allow them to find something that's not a curricular topic which somebody else gave to them, but something that they are passionate about, and give them the support to do independent research and independent study, which we've gone, 16 years down the road now, or 17 years with science research, and I guess my question is it time to make the same kind of program or something, which maybe not a 3-year program, a 1-year program that allows students in the humanities, whether it's in foreign language or English or social studies, to do the same kind of mentored research.
Just briefly, in social studies, I do think National History Day has great potential. Part of it is to find staff members who can take it and run with it and feel comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. There's someone now in the middle school that we think we can work with that's interested, and same with the high school. So then it becomes, we have to find the means to allow the students the time, whether it's through exploratory, whatever the means is in HCC. And yeah, I think it is a worthy, and we have been doing legwork. Someone went to a conference in National History Day in October. So this is all stuff that I do agree that it's small steps. So maybe as an exploratory after school at the high school to start, and then as students show the interest or we develop, that culture can continue. I agree, for sure.
Okay, any further questions or comments from the board? Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations on, I think, a terrific report and terrific commendations. No, I don't believe it's an action item. Okay. The next item on the agenda is 8.3, which is the last item of new business. School breakfast program, public hearing to discuss continuation of exemption 2008-9. Dick, are we here to see whether anybody from the public wants to comment?
Certainly.
Anybody from the public wish to comment?
I'm all for breakfast.
Anything you want to remark on this, Dick?
Yes. For the last several years, we have not provided a breakfast program. In fact, I'm not sure if the Byron Hill School District ever has, but in order to obtain an exemption, we actually have to survey our students. We will be doing that over the next few weeks. This will be our K through 5 students. The 5th grade students are being surveyed because they'll be next year's 6th grade. By law, we have to provide a K-6 breakfast program unless it turns out from that survey that 80% of the students indicate, with their parents are actually indicating this, that they would not participate on average 3 times a week. And we've always found when we've done the survey that we do not get the level of participation required to provide the program. We're anticipating that will happen again, but we don't really know, and the purpose for the public hearing is if there are any people in the community who really want to share their thoughts with the board, they'd have that opportunity to do so.
Apparently none.
Right.
Thank you, Dick. Let us know how the survey goes.
Yes, I do have one thing I'd like to make sure we take action on, and that is that if it turns out that the exemption survey provides the necessary support to be able to seek the exemption, that the board would authorize that to the school district to seek the exemption.
Yes. Is there any objection to that? Okay. You can do by consensus.
Thank you.
Okay. Staff report, Superintendent.
Superintendent will deliver a standing report for 1 minute. Just to call attention to the artwork on display in the room.
Fabulous.
It's been a great favor to visitors to the district office to see these periodic art shows of student work. Tonight, we actually have teacher work in the boardroom. Some student work in the halls outside. I think this is probably a teaser for us all to attend the district art show, which I think is May 15th, and the days immediately following. People are welcome to visit it in the district office, but you'll see a lot more if you can come to the district art show. So thanks for the contributions.
Thank you. Deputy?
This is same Monday is our curriculum committee site-based team meeting, 4 to 6 at Byram Hills High School. And we're going to have some fabulous middle school presenters of their work for the year. So join us if you can.
10 o'clock?
4 to 6.
4 to 6.
At Byram Hills High School.
Richard.
Just quickly, the district's internal auditors were with us last week. They'll be with us again next week, and then we're hoping to have a report in June for the board for their acceptance in terms of the internal audit. And we're also gearing up now for the external audit. The preliminary report will be starting soon. And Susan, thank you for all your help with this.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's all your fault.
No.
Okay, President's report, just to note that on April 29th, we had the required quorum to participate in the BOCES vote. We also had a brief meeting with the internal auditor. And I would just note that today was a wonderful reminder of why we did the athletic fields project. For those of you who came early, you saw we had, I think, in excess of 10 high schools here for a section-wide track tournament. We had softball game going, baseball game going, there was tennis going. It was really a wonderful athletic day here at Byram Hills. Any committee board members report? We have a town liaison meeting Thursday morning. 7 a.m. here. Any other committee board member reports? Okay. Top to future agenda, RFI. Need I repeat the budget vote date again? I won't do it. The 2008-2009 board calendar draft is in the packet. We can discuss that at the next meeting. When does that have to be finalized?
At your reorganization meeting.
Okay, so we can do that another time.
Can I just
Hold on.
Can we just report on the mistakes?
Yeah.
Well, sure. Report on the mistakes.
September 15th is actually the 14th, because that's the Sunday.
Right. There is a corrected copy that I guess you didn't get. We'd be happy to take any corrections on this copy and any suggestions on future. We'll act as the clearinghouse for the board.
And
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to ask if I can't recall what our practice was about meeting on election day, particularly a presidential election day.
Oh.
And
November 4th is the presidential election day? That's the date?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, let's not
No, we can't do
That's,
that election.
okay.
I may be moving to Canada on the 5th, so we can't do that.
So let's not have a meeting on the 5th.
Right.
Thanks for pointing that
We're
out.
getting inappropriate at this hour, I
No, well, we really shouldn't be meeting on November 4th. A lot of us like to really watch the returns come in.
Well, we have to have a discussion of this in general, I would
Yes.
think, before.
Well, we're just making comments.
We're going to have hopefully a revised calendar come out for our discussion, which will be an action item.
If we could establish, and I know it's next on the agenda, so maybe it's your intent to do so, but if we could just figure out if this July 8th date is going to fly, it would be helpful, because that's getting close, and we'd like to plan.
We're going to talk about that momentarily. If there are other obvious errors in the calendar, Gail, you want to say something?
I have an obvious error. I just can't come on the 14th
Of September.
for the board retreat.
Oh,
Oh, that's a problem.
well, okay, so I'll tell you what. At the next meeting, we're going to go through the calendar. Please, if necessary, bring your calendars for September or come with the date so we can plan our board retreat when we can do it. Typically, the weekend has worked best for the board retreat. I think we should continue with that.
Could we ask maybe Jackie or to throw out some dates, because I'm going to have some real difficulty with weekends in September, and I'm not going to be able to say on the fly whether or not it works. I'm
So
really
maybe we can get those dates circulated before the meeting and we can talk about it then.
Definitely, for what it's worth, I can't make the 21st of October.
October 21, okay. Fewer meetings next year. Okay, July 8th. The reason it's July 8th, one of the reasons is I'm going to be out of the country the first week in July. So we kicked over to the next week, and July 8th just appears to be as good a day as any. Anyone know they cannot make July 8th at 7:30 in the evening? Everybody can make it? Well, we'll miss you, John. Okay, so the reorganization meeting, Madam Superintendent will be July 8th at 7:30, at which point you will...
We'd like it to be a brief meeting.
Well, I understand you have other things in mind.
And then I'd like to, if the board is so inclined, to do a workshop right after, because the next morning we'll be going on the administrative retreat, and I thought it would be a good idea to have a sense of the board's goals for the year.
We're not married to a Tuesday. If you need more than 12 hours, do you want to do Monday the 7th or something like that, just to give yourself some breathing room?
We could do the 7th. I can't remember why we picked the 8th.
I just want to make it easier so you can collect your thoughts before the retreat.
I'd be available the 7th as well. Is that easy for you, Jackie?
The 7th would be great.
7th okay for everyone?
I'll let you know if it isn't. I don't have it.
Okay, well, let's tentatively plan on the 7th then.
Great.
At 7:30 p.m. Even if it's no good, just let us know as soon as you can. Okay, that'd be for the reorganization. John, you'll be excused.
Thank you.
Okay. Communications to the board. I have received a correspondence on an individual personnel matter. I've also received correspondence on a contractual matter. Any other communications to the board other than the standard stuff? Okay. May I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of March 18th, 2008, and for the special meeting, do we have the special meeting minutes in there?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, yeah, there they are. And for the minutes of April 29th, 2008.
So moved.
Second, any corrections, changes? Eve?
Just on page 3 of the March 18th minutes, under the area that's bulleted where it says Mr. Schulman stated there were several items, then it said whatever, second line down, remarked that this was a new error and requested a $0 increase for next year's school budget. I don't believe
I'm not sure that's what you said.
I think you requested that any new initiatives zero out in the budget.
It was a zero, it was an offset.
Yes.
Right.
How would you like it phrased, Ira, since it was yours?
Eve, your recollection of what I said is probably better than my recollection of what I said.
I guess that any new initiatives be...
Any new initiatives be offset by
That's okay.
reductions in existing expenditures.
Right.
And I'm
That's
sure I
it.
said something as eloquent as that.
You did now.
Rick?
I just want to correct on page 4, where I guess it's the foundation amount. It's I think it's just a typo. You meant 181,553, not 753.
Right.
And the question mark after 8.3.
Tax exemptions. Well, actually...
Is a question mark?
It is, there is a question
was it,
mark.
yes.
Yes, there is a question mark there.
Okay, fine.
No, that was correct. Okay. Motion to approve the minutes. You have something, Brett?
No, I just wanted to request that the motion be
Yes,
separately,
we will.
because I'm going to
Correct.
abstain.
Motion to approve the minutes for March 18th as revised. So move second. All in favor, please? I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the special meeting of April 29th, 2008.
So moved.
Second? Someone's got a second? All in favor, please? All abstaining? Okay. Any opposed? All right. Okay, may I have a motion, please, to go into executive session for purposes of discussing a contractual matter involving, it was a contractual matter involving a, I believe the security contract.
We had some other items too, didn't we? No, I don't think we did all of them.
We're done. There's one item. There's just one.
What about this one?
Just one.
Yeah, we had some other items, Ira.
Hold on.
There's no right
Hold on just a second. I thought we were pretty much done with all stuff. Let's see.
No,
We did not do
I thought we
13-4.
agreed that Wendy and Brett were going to do the board evaluation.
And we didn't do
We have
13-2.
to do, okay, purposes of going into a contractual matter, discussion regarding a board self-evaluation, and regarding the legal status of a Byram Hills staff member. And that's it.
Thank you.
All in favor, please? Thank you for watching this meeting, and good evening.